Welcome, dear listeners. I'm Jonathan Carlin.
And I'm Benjamin Carlin.
And we invite you to join us through the Griffin Door, your one-way ticket to the enchanting world of Harry Potter. So as ever, grab your wands, dust off your broomsticks, and join us as we unlock the secrets behind Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys.
Oh, man.
I see you went full name today.
Yeah, I did go full name.
Yeah,
I went full Benjamin. I noticed that you had gone full Jonathan, and I know that on Internet Parlay we have largely referred to you as the letter J.
That's true.
Yeah. And
it didn't even occur to me that as something I needed to consider as I was just typing out my own name. Like, hello, I'm Jonathan Carlin. Of course, that's my name. No need to rethink that.
Right. No edits required whatsoever.
Right.
So anyway, but yeah, I was like, as long as Jay's going formal, I might as well go formal too.
Right. Yeah.
So,
this is welcome to our extremely formal podcast.
You don't know, but I just gave you a proper bow. Okay, yes, so we are into Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys, which is, of course, following up on our cliffhanger from Chapter 3,
Dun, dun, dun.
wherein Harry's birthday counted down to the second and was delivered a final boom at the crest of midnight.
The Crest of Midnight.
Wherein we know, yeah.
That sounds like a different fantasy novel. You reading The Crest of Midnight?
Oh, yeah, I can't put it
so
down. So we know, of course, that the boom associated is the arrival of one Rubeus Hagrid, who has arrived on the hut on the rock to collect one Harry James Potter to deliver him his letter officially. In this chapter, we get a whole bunch of really, honestly amazing dialogue where the Dursleys, who have largely had the upper hand on the situation between Harry's relationship with them, it sort of gets turned on its head a little bit, and all of a sudden there is somebody in the room who has more authority than Vernon, which is really just like it feels like such justice.
It does feel like such, especially because part of his intimidation tactics are just that he's like such a large person in general, and then it's like then Hagrid walks in, and it's like even Vernon's kind of just like a small guy next to Hagrid.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But there's one of the amazing moments from the movie that I quote all the time, which is, the door busts in, you see the silhouette of giant Hagrid, and then he steps in the door and he's like, sorry about that.
Yeah. That's not actually in the book.
It's not in the book, I know.
Yeah.
But it's like, it is amazing because it's like you can just tell so quickly that Hagrid is like, while it is the, again, the middle of the night, while he can look potentially intimidating, he is just a complete kind-hearted soul who is just there to finally be able to return to Harry to bring him off to Hogwarts. However, in this exchange, we of course know that there's a little bit of what would be the right way to describe it here? The Dursleys basically do stand up for themselves, I suppose.
As best they can.
As best they can, we discover that to Hagrid's utter dismay, the Dursleys have not taught Harry anything whatsoever about his position in the wizarding world.
Or that he's a wizard at all, or even what Hogwarts is, or anything.
Even down to the simple fact that, he doesn't know anything about what happened to his parents. There's the whole car crash situation, and Hagrid is just like, "What? You must be kidding me right now." So just honestly, this is a really great chapter because you get like a lot of nice warmth, really for the first time since really chapter 1, when we last saw Hagrid and just sort of his like sadness towards leaving Harry. So
yeah,
he's back. Happiness is back.
He's back. It's fantastic. I love right away how when he gets, a few things. So right when he gets there, I love when he's like, couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey. And it's like, first of all, how did he get there at all? Like, because they leave on the boat, but the boat was already there. Like, I don't understand how Hagrid got to the island.
Yeah, I don't specifically either. It's undisclosed magic of sorts.
Undisclosed magic of sorts. There's a lot of like undisclosed things Hagrid's supposed to be doing there. So that's kind of funny. I guess he says like, I was allowed to do a little bit of magic to get to you or to bring you your letter, and it's like, by who? Who allowed you to do magic? Like, but what governing body like allowed you to do it? Like, was it just Dumbledore?
It's just Dumbledore.
It's just Dumbledore. It has to be, right? Because otherwise, it's like anyone allowing you to do magic would then have to like acknowledge, like, how would you do it without a wand, which they think you don't have, which clearly you do. So it had to be Dumbledore. But if it's Dumbledore, then it's like, then you can just always do magic, right? Because you just work for Dumbledore at the school. Who's gonna know?
Right. Well, and this goes back to one of our original. We talked about it a little bit in one of the past episodes, but like again, the relationship between Hagrid and Dumbledore is utterly ironclad.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it would largely be the case that like Hagrid regards rules as far as the word of, you know, the big man himself, Dumbledore. And so if Dumbledore authorizes it, then Hagrid is like, if it's good by you, then it's good by me.
It's good by me.
And a big piece of that is, of course, the fact that, you know, Hagrid has his famous pink flowery umbrella.
Yes.
Which I love. I mean, again, as a kid, this was like the perfect juxtaposition of like large, you know, grisly, intimidating looking person who is otherwise then carrying this pink flowery umbrella, which is so innocuous and seems so innocent and all the rest. Like, it doesn't seem like it would go with his character, but at the same time, like, perfectly fits. But he says at some point in time in this chapter that his wand was in fact actually snapped in half.
Right.
However, we know that at some point in time it must have been repaired because clearly it is concealed inside of said pink umbrella.
Yeah, they always act like the pieces are concealed inside of there. But like, if your wand is broken in half, like, it cannot do magic anymore. Like, we've seen Ron's wand like almost split in half, basically can't do magic. And then you see Harry's Holly wand is basically split in half, is like holding on by a thread, but it can't do magic anymore.
Yep.
So it's like, if it's just the pieces next to each other in the umbrella, it's not doing magic. Like, it's been repaired, which is just like, it's like you couldn't possibly know it the first time you read it, but it is like a little nod to the Elder Wand and its power, because of all the magic that the Elder Wand is supposedly able to do, like way later on, and way in Deathly Hallows, they always talk about this crazy magic. You never actually see it do anything,
right,
except repair Harry's Holly wand. Like, that's the big magic you actually see it do. So it is kind of like a cool like nod to that, like, as soon as you meet Hagrid.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to that point, because it's like we know that Dumbledore is currently the one wielding the Elder Wand, and
yes,
therefore it must be the case that if Hagrid declares that his wand was snapped in half, like I don't see it in Hagrid's nature to disclose that information if it didn't actually happen. Like, yeah, wink, wink. They totally snapped it in half. They didn't actually, because clearly I'm holding it. I feel like,
but like, it definitely was, because why it snapped in half is because he is assumed to be a murderer, basically.
Yeah, to have opened the Chamber of Secrets, released the monster within, which led to the death of eventually Mona Myrtle. But so anyway, this goes back to my point where it's like the whole Fantastic Beasts saga, it's like, what is Hagrid obsessed with? Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah.
And the whole saga is leading up to, we know in 1992, the Chamber of Secrets will eventually be opened. So 50 years prior to that is 1942. Dumbledore's big duel with Grindelwald. 1945. Yeah, so we're within the proper time frame for when Hagrid would have been aiding Dumbledore in any capacity whatsoever, including his role as the Keeper of Keys at Hogwarts School, which is a role that is, you know, granted to him by Dumbledore immediately upon his expulsion. So what we have again always led ourselves to believe is that Hagrid's role in helping Dumbledore take down Grindelwald in 1945 was a favor repaid by Dumbledore, not only in lifelong trust, but also in the reparation of his wand.
Yeah. Okay, so it's so interesting too about Hagrid being like immediately hired back on after being apparently like assumed to murder or whatever, because Dumbledore works at the school, so Hagrid being hired back on, and like Dumbledore never really believes it's Hagrid who killed Myrtle at all.
Yep,
so like place. One, it is baffling to me that literally no one in 50 years asks the ghost of Myrtle how she died.
Oh yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like that didn't come up.
That didn't come up.
Part of the investigation.
Right?
Yeah.
Or I feel like there should be a line somewhere that's like, anytime anyone asks her, she just like bawls and runs away or something.
Easy kind of way. In fact, it's probably just implied on some level that is what happened.
Perhaps it's implied, but it is baffling that happens. But it's also baffling to me that Dumbledore basically never assumes it's Hagrid, which means that he doesn't think Aragog was the monster, which means, as far as he's concerned, the monster is still at large.
Oh, true.
So it's like, what is he doing for 50 years, like with like the knowledge that the monster exists? you know?
Not to mention, at this point in time, Dumbledore is not even headmaster. He is the Transfiguration professor,
Right.
and Armando Dippet would be the headmaster. So Dumbledore's got a lot of pull.
A lot of pull to be like, okay, like Armando, hear me out, bro. Okay, I know Hagrid just apparently killed someone with a giant spider and is a murderer. Hear me out. We hire him. What do you think?
I don't think it'll cause
We
any
keep
issues
him
whatsoever.
around the students and give him a smidge of authority. You're in?
He will
cool.
he will have keys to everywhere.
Yeah.
Does that seem like a problem?
Yeah,
or
yeah. Well, yeah, I want him to have access literally everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah, so somehow, some way, Hagrid stays on, and the good news is that we of course know that Hagrid is not a dangerous person. Is in fact a kind soul, and is just having prejudice used against him, which we never want to see. But it's really amazing. Like I said, I mean, I think the warmth that Hagrid brings to the story almost immediately.
I mean, he does light a fire right away.
He does light a fire.
It's almost
right
like
away.
magically warm too.
Right? Yes,
Yeah.
because it seems like Uncle Vernon has tried to light a fire using like the packaging from the potato chips that he's brought with him, which is like that was never going to be a fire ever.
I know, like even if those were, even if potato, like I'm imagining like a bag of Lay's or something.
Sure, yeah,
you
like
know,
standard bag of potato
standard
chips.
bag of potato chips, which like one, even if you had 4 of those and they were highly flammable, they would burn for like 10 seconds together.
I mean, you do not have a crackling fire.
You don't
under
have a
any
crackling
circumstances.
fire.
Yeah, but
on top of that, they're not flammable.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the thing is, there is that it's like part of you is like, did Hagrid just have like wood in his coat? And it's like, you might be like, well, that would be ridiculous. Who would carry wood? But it's like, he also has a live owl inside of his coat.
And mice. What are the
Maybe
mice for?
Yeah.
I know. I guess maybe he needs to feed the owl. I don't know.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
I mean, that
owls.
was the one at the end. He's like, there might be a few more field mice in there. And it was like, why? Why are you just carrying mice with you? That's crazy.
Yes, but it is it's a remarkable turnaround from the beginning of the chapter to the end to see that Harry goes from sleeping underneath this like bare thread rag on the soft piece of floor.
Yeah, the
to-
softest piece of floor.
Right. There does seem to be something rather cozy about. I think Hagrid says you can kip in this tonight, which I just love that line.
Yeah, I
and-
want to say there's like an early thing where his coat is described as like a bearskin coat here, but like for the rest of the story, it's a moleskin overcoat.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, which it seems like moles being quite small. It's like, how many moles?
I know. Like, why do we switch gears? His coat's also described as being black in this chapter, which is just like that. Oh, I'm like, Hagrid wears a brown coat.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
Like,
I agree.
Wrong. You got the wrong color here.
Brown coat.
Brown coat for Hagrid. I love that when he gets there, he says, like, he immediately asks them to brew some tea, and then he says, I'd also not say no to something stronger if you've got it, mind. And then it's like he's just asking the Dursleys, like, I'm here. Would you mind making me some tea, or do you have any alcohol?
Yeah.
Basically. And what's great about it is that, like, after they don't, he's like, don't worry, I've got literally all the supplies and alcohol with me.
A literal kettle will come out of this coat.
I have a kettle. I can make fire. I've got teacups. I've got tea bags. I've got water to make the tea, and I've got some other amber liquid to take a swig of. So it's like he asks for all these things, but he's already got it all.
He does already have it. Yeah, no, I noticed that exact same thing. It's like, well, that's kind of funny.
Oh.
But I love the description of like soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage.
Squashy sausages, Ben. There's a squashy package of sausages.
You're right. Well, but they sound delicious once cooked.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out squashy because it's one of those very Harry Potter words that like you don't use in regular life very much, but like it's already been used to describe Uncle Vernon's face when Harry
right.
stepped
Yeah.
on it, and now this is being used to describe the package of sausages, and it's like often the word for like the Gryffindor armchairs and the sleeping bags in the Great Hall. It's like why is it's such a Harry Potter word, squashy.
Squashy. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should adopt it into our vernacular even more.
I just want a shirt that just says squashy.
That's a great one. Our first official piece of merch is, is the squashy shirt.
The squashy shirt. You know what though? It sounds now. I was imagining a T-shirt, but I feel like it needs to be like a really like thick, cozy kind of thing.
Maybe it won't say squashy. It will just simply be
It's
squashy.
just the squashy shirt.
like a squashy sweater, and it's like the squashy sweater is just like a really oversized, cozy, thick sweater.
Yeah.
That you could kip in if needed.
If you could kip in.
Yeah.
Kip in.
But no, I love this. Again, I mean, it seems good. I mean, I'm like hungry on behalf of literally all the occupants of the hut. So like the sound of the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages. It's like, oh man.
I know. Every time I read that, I'm like, I'm hungry.
I know. Yeah, it's like I'm gonna go buy some squashy sausages.
Yeah.
As soon as I get out of work. Let's see here. Oh, I love this though. So shortly thereafter, Hagrid says, "Call me Hagrid." He said, "Everyone does." And this is like one of those things where it's like we even mentioned it in the first chapter about how Rubeus means the color red, which is of course his name. And yet, whenever I think of Hagrid, I never think of it as if we are referring to him by his surname.
Oh yeah,
like, right. I feel like Hagrid is like his first name,
right,
and his last name, and he also has another first name called Rubeus.
Yeah, but Hagrid is the true name of Hagrid.
Hagrid is the true name of Hagrid. Yeah, it's pretty perfect. So I like the clarification there. The call me Hagrid. Everyone does.
Hagrid. Well, call me Jonathan. Almost no one does, except my wife.
There you go.
The next thing is just basically Hagrid getting right down to business, freaking out at the Dursleys for not like. I love Hagrid's like backtracking. Like he's like what he assumes Harry knows is that he's a wizard. Like what does Hagrid think? Hagrid thinks that Harry knows that he's a wizard.
And that his parents were tragically killed by a Dark Lord.
A dark wizard. And that he knows what Hogwarts is.
Yes.
Yes. But it turns out Harry knows literally none of it. Not that magic is real, not that wizards exist, doesn't know what Hogwarts is, doesn't know how his parents died, any of it. And like you can see him like reeling like, oh God, oh boy, Hagrid, I'm the one who has to tell you all of this?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Well, and it's interesting because we've said it a couple of times as well, and I'm going to come back to it again. And then I think once we're past this chapter, I don't think we'll have to anymore. But we will learn that part of the reason that so much of this information was withheld actually is really not coming so much from Vernon's end of the spectrum, but rather Petunia's, who had grown up with her sister Lily, who was like sent off to wizard school, and her parents were just so proud of the fact that there was a witch in the family. And we will eventually learn of the really extreme jealousy that Petunia had, rather than like initial disinterest. Like in fact, she herself would have loved to have gone to Hogwarts and felt like more left out by not being included. But then from there, you see that Petunia's parents were also just couldn't have been happier with this. Like they didn't judge Lily for being in this way different from what they had always known, and they celebrated the fact that she was in fact magical, and it came across in a way to Petunia that must have made her feel less than for then not having these abilities.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why Petunia then adopts this like not only like very normal, stereotypically regular lifestyle, but like adopts it as like this is absolutely the way things should be.
Yes, and it's like because there was like nothing that anybody could do to make her a witch upon not having just been a witch in the first place. She sort of had to like go in like kind of overcorrect in the other direction. But in addition to that, I feel like it goes back to that sentiment where I feel like was intending to make Harry feel discarded or less than by being different in any capacity.
Sure.
And therefore, so she was, I feel like, treating Dudley in the way she felt as though her parents had treated Lily, and therefore making Harry feel the same way that she, Petunia, would have felt growing up.
It's all coming full circle.
I know, it's all coming full circle.
Indeed.
So, but that was jumping ahead just a little bit there. So,
then we get to the big moment. Go boil your heads, both of ya. Harry, you're a wizard.
But I can't be a lizard.
I can't be a lizard. Yeah. Oh, I love the meme where it's like, you're a wizard, Harry. And he's like, you're a hairy wizard.
It's so spot on.
So spot on. So exactly right. I love that line. This is one where it's like, in the movies, there's like, you're a wizard, Harry. It's like, it's backwards, whereas in the book it says, Harry, you're a wizard. Either way, either delivery always gives me chills.
Oh, yeah.
Always like, oh, the beginning of the journey.
I know.
Yay.
It's really happening. And of course, you get the final momentous occasion where, at this point in time, there is nothing the Dursleys can do to prevent Hagrid from reaching into his coat to pull out a letter and physically hand it to Harry, who is finally able to open it and receives his admittance to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
Right. We await your owl by no later than July 31st, which is today, as the story goes. That is, it's funny. It's like, oh, good. I guess Hagrid did have to come today.
Yes.
But I also think it's funny that the letter is signed Minerva McGonagall, which, I mean, that's not really that funny or anything, but it does make me think that that makes it, seem like she's the one sending the letters, which to me then means she's the one being really like passive aggressive with like the address and like where Harry's laying on the floor and like the smallest bedroom. Like that's McGonagall being like,
Well, like, so I was curious about that as well, because I feel like there's the line where Hagrid says like I was allowed to do it to get you your letters and to get you to school and everything, but I'm not really supposed to be doing it otherwise. And I was like, or was it Hagrid? Because it almost feels like a little bit. It feels more McGonagall than it feels Hagrid to me. Like Hagrid just feels like so good natured that I can't see the passive aggressive crossing his mind.
Right.
Not that McGonagall isn't also just splendid, but I could see her being a bit more like she's watched the Dursleys. She has a greater scope of things. She's like, I knew from the moment we left you here that this was going to be a problem.
This was a bad idea.
I've been waiting my revenge.
Right, like, and this is how I will do it.
The next page we get the he does it a couple of times, and there's slightly different iterations each time, but it's the Hagrid gives us Galloping Gorgons.
Galloping Gorgons, which is a creature we never actually encounter in the story.
Yep, and this exclamation I think is eventually replaced with Merlin's beard.
Merlin's beard, or Galloping Gargoyles later in this same chapter.
Yep, we get that one as well. Hagrid sends the letter to Professor Dumbledore, letting him know that he has successfully found Harry, and just throws it out into the.
I love how he includes a little note about the weather. I gave Harry his letter, taking him to buy things. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well.
I know.
Did you need to include that?
It reminds me so much of our grandfather, who I feel like has a heavy emphasis on tracking and recording the weather, like like a daily journal.
You're right. He has a weather journal.
He has a weather journal, and it feels like I don't know if in earlier days of communication, it would be like a common thing to just sort of like include in like a letter or something, because I always thought like, oh, the weather's horrible. It's like, oh man, that's so funny that like out of the what, like 25 words he used, he saved 2 to include a weather report.
Weather's horrible.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I also like this is like just a little thing we mentioned earlier where it sounds like McGonagall had this like almost sense of superiority about like the being magical, I suppose. Like, oh, they're not completely stupid. Back in chapter 1.
Yeah.
So here where Hagrid's telling Harry what muggles are, it's like his description of it is that that's what we call non-magic folk like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I ever laid eyes on. It's like he's almost using it there as like a little bit more derogatory towards like all muggles, that like it seems like it is a classification of people which is non-magical. But then like if you're like a muggle, you could also be like derogatory and like you're like aggressively non-magic on purpose.
Right. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's like the scale of muggle that you are, and the more muggly you are, the worse you are. And it's
right.
Like, well, that's also probably not terribly fair.
Not helpful.
Like,
not helpful.
People can't help not being magical.
Yeah. There's a little. I feel like there's a little bit of a Snape hint here in the next paragraph too, where Petunia's talking about Lily coming home. She came home every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. So what's interesting about that is that that shouldn't be allowed. Like,
yes, it
clearly
should be
Petunia has several exact examples of like things Lily was doing, turning teacups into rats. I think that's even a lesson you get to see later on.
Yeah.
But it's like, and we know that the way the trace works is that like if you're in a muggle household and you're a wizard kid and you do magic, it'll like they'll be able to hone in on you because magic happened there. They won't know that like, oh, Harry Potter did magic at the Dursleys. They'll just be like, well, magic happened at the Dursleys and Harry's living there, so it was Harry.
So it was Harry, yeah.
So it was Harry, even though it was Dobby.
It's always a very, very unfair advantage that kids that come from wizard families then have.
Oh, I know.
they can practice all summer.
Oh, I know. And they're like, we rely on wizard parents to patrol this particular thing. And I'm like, this is the reason. That is the exact reason Slytherin house has won the House Cup 7 years in a row. Because all the other houses are like, kids, stop doing magic. And all the Slytherin families, were just like, all right, here we go. They're not going to know it's you. Get down here. We're practicing Lumos. We're going to do the summoning charm. We're going to get ahead over the summer. Cool.
Yes.
It's like, and of course, and if you're in Slytherin, you're the kind of student who's like, absolutely, yeah. I want to be ahead.
Yeah, underlying
any advantage.
Yep.
But so the fact that Lily was at home turning teacups into rats and not getting caught suggests that she couldn't have been doing it at her house because she would have been zeroed in on immediately.
Right.
Because so it suggests that she was doing it with a different wizard or witch who lived nearby. Not that you know anything about the trace or anything at this point, but it almost definitely means her and Snape were doing it together.
Yes,
we're hanging out in this way.
It must have been in proximity, close enough to Snape's mother.
Yeah.
that it would be acceptable, or that at the very least the Ministry for Magic would believe that this was an acceptable use of magic and not underage.
Yeah.
As we scroll down the page a little bit, there's the exclamation as Hagrid discovers the fact that Harry is under the impression that his parents were killed in a car crash. His reaction is kind of interesting because, and this has always sort of stood out to me because it's a couple of different things. He says, how could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? Like, partially on some level, it's like as if Hagrid is suggesting, like, yeah, as a wizard, you would never be subject to a car crash. Like this would not be something that would, like, so it makes you wonder whether or not, some of the accidental magic that Harry has performed up until this stage of his life.
Yeah.
If like in the event that you were a wizard who was driving an automobile, which under most circumstances you probably just don't need to.
Yeah.
Because you have other means of travel which would otherwise be faster. But it almost suggests that somehow possibly like wizards in that moment might enact a form of wandless or nonverbal magic that might like cause the cars to like just bounce or something.
Yeah,
like
it does
that,
seem like there's like some sort of involuntary reaction that would occur to protect wizards in a situation like this. It's
yes.
like we talked earlier, like with Mrs. Fig, like there's no reason her leg should have been broken for any amount of time because she knows wizards who can mend it immediately.
Lickety split. Yeah.
Lickety split. Lickety not so split,
exactly.
as it were.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you have regular wounds or ailments as a wizard, they can cure them immediately. It's that they have their own set of like magical wounds and ailments that require like magical cures and potions and stuff like that. So you're right. It does seem like it does suggest that like something as mundane as a car crash could not possibly kill a wizard.
Yes.
Although Harry and Ron do crash the car into the Whopping Willow, which I guess they don't die from though.
That's true. That's true. The other bit I was going to say about this line is that I love Hagrid's way of responding to this, but he goes, "It's an outrage, a scandal."
A scandal.
I love the use of scandal there, and they carried it over into the films as well. He says it in the film.
Yeah.
Also, and I'm always like, scandal. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. Oh man, let's see. Moving on. Next, he has to tell Harry about Voldemort and how he survived about it. And I love when he's so nervous about saying the name Voldemort here, and Harry makes the suggestion, "Could you write it down?" He says, "Nah, I can't spell it." I'm like, that always bothers me because like Voldemort is not hard to spell at all. It is spelled exactly like it sounds. And like, I mean, he just wrote a letter, like the word tomorrow is harder to spell than Voldemort, that's in there.
Right.
He correctly spelled professor and Dumbledore. Like, I think you could handle Voldemort.
Yeah.
At least you could write it down to the point that Harry could read what you think it sounds like.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, spelling doesn't terribly matter if as long as you get the rough hue of it. The other kind of interesting thing from an audiobook standpoint is at this point in the audiobook, Jim Dale is pronouncing Voldemort in that way, where it's a silent T at the end, Voldemort. And as the films are released, they do pronounce the T. And as of book 5, I was actually just reading this fun fact, I didn't know it. As of book 5, Jim Dale actually starts to refer to him as Voldemort instead of Voldemort.
Okay.
Which I just found to be kind of interesting.
Oh, like he just sort of switches.
That he like changes course. Yeah, like five books in. So that's sort of an interesting one.
It is an important occasion that it's the first time Harry hears the name Voldemort.
Yep,
is when Hagrid says it. That's kind of interesting. We talked before about whether or not people coming out of the Imperius Curse would have been a cue that Voldemort was gone. Hagrid kind of confirms that here. Like, didn't know who to trust, didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards. People came out of trances and stuff like that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Now, we also get a little bit more explanation about Lily and James. There's a little bit of like one of those like consistency questions as well, where it says, your mom and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day.
Yep.
Interestingly, we will eventually learn that out of the Marauders, it is not James who is prefect, but rather Remus Lupin. And so his eventual assignment to head boy is kind of interesting because it means that they don't exclusively pull from
the prefix, yeah.
However, possibly could pull from Quidditch captains, which James would have been in his 6th year. And Harry also eventually is Quidditch captain. So
that's true.
At the very least, it sounds like Quidditch captains and prefects have similar allowances in terms of additional amenities and use of the prefix restrooms and that type of thing. So it's possible that that's how that comes to be. It's not a surprise at all that Lily is head girl because she's just sort of extraordinary.
I guess we don't know for sure that she was a prefect, but
that's a good point as well. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, but either way, too bad for the assumption I always had, like, before you do that math, is that you need to be a prefect, and that like then when you're going into your 7th year, it's like just one of the there's two prefects per year, right? One boy, one girl per house.
Seems like one boy, one girl per house.
Oh yeah. So then you'd think it's just between you and the 3 other prefects from the other houses.
Yes.
Yeah, that gets to be like the head boy of all the prefects or whatever. But alas, no, it can also just be James Potter over there.
Can you imagine how mad all those prefects would be? They would be like, "Are you kidding me?"
Oh yeah. Do you think Snape was a prefect? Oh, I super love to think that he was.
I don't know. I can sort of see it. I mean, he's a great student. Slughorn taught him.
Right, that's true. And he would have been great in Slughorn's class specifically because he's great at potions. So he would have been excelling there. We know he was filling out his Defense Against the Dark Arts (OWL) really hard. I guess he would have been selected for prefect before that, but it does seem like he was in that crowd. Probably wasn't like super popular, it doesn't sound like. So maybe I could see
Slughorn looking past him for that because he's got the Slug Club. He's well connected people, and Snape is not really that kind of student.
Yeah, I mean, not that you have to necessarily be popular to be a prefect, but typically
Percy.
I would. Yeah, Percy. Yeah, that's true. Percy's a prefect. Yeah. I can see you'd want probably a considered well-liked student by your peers to be a prefect, though.
You want them to have some measure of authority, and that probably comes with not being somebody that is going to just be questioned at every turn.
But at that exact rate, though, the Marauders are then picking on a prefect. If Snape is a prefect, then the Marauders are picking on him, and he is not playing that card at all.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, but I guess Lupin's there as well, but he's sort of just off in the background, whatever. It's fine.
I mean, they specifically say they think that they assigned Lupin as the prefect in hopes of it calming down the rest of the Marauders.
But I also like the idea of Snape being a prefect, just because that it means as far as Snape's concerned, it's him and Lupin and the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuffs, and they're like, nah, it's none of you guys, it's James Potter. He's like, are you what? No, it is not James Potter.
Oh, that would be so infuriating.
Yeah,
so infuriating.
Yeah, it would be.
When you're in high school and you've got one of those people who is just the bane of your existence, and they find glory. It's just nothing could be worse.
Oh, what's worse? Is he going to ask out the girl I like? What?
No. She said he was a toe rag. Oh, well, anyway, so much for that. We've gotten really off the rails here. We learned a little bit more about early members of the First Order of the Phoenix, including the McKinnons, the Bones, and the Pruitts, who we've previously mentioned before. The Pruitts, Fabian and Gideon, are in fact Molly Weasley's two brothers. Yep. And kind of just goes to show to Harry that it wasn't just his family that was impacted, and we will eventually learn, obviously, that now the Pruitts niece and nephews will be fellow students with Harry in the form of the Weasleys.
Yep.
We will have Susan Bones, who is a fellow classmate of Harry's as well, and
Yep.
we'll eventually meet her
Madam
aunt.
Bones,
Madam Bones, correct. So it is the case that Harry is going to school, and then the one that goes unmentioned is, of course, also the Longbottoms.
Yeah. Well, they weren't. I mean, so this is Hagrid's a little bit incorrect what he says here, because he says that he killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age, including the McKinnon's Bones and the Pruitts. But I think later on it's confirmed that the Pruitts were actually killed by a group. It was like the 2 of them versus 5 Death Eaters to take them down. So either he's speaking more like on Voldemort's orders they were killed.
That's how I read it.
Yeah. But also then the Longbottoms would not have been attacked under Voldemort's orders, because they're attacked after he falls.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But what it means, though, is that Harry will eventually be going to school with a potential handful of other students whose lives have been massively impacted in the same way that his has been.
Yes.
Just Harry has kind of like his own kind of specific and unique role inside of that.
Yep.
Let's see here. Hagrid eventually goes on to say that, like, some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die, though.
It's a pretty good guess.
I was like, I highlighted that, and I was like, Hagrid is pretty much dead on.
Pretty
like,
much, yeah.
Pun intended on that one, but basically, because when it comes down to it, like the exact reason why Voldemort does not die in this circumstance is because his own physical being, we've always called it like Voldemort Prime, the version of him that is like the physical body existence that includes like his mind and other body and everything, like it can't be destroyed in that circumstance because he's otherwise anchored. So
yeah, and it's like, I mean, not having enough human left in him to die is exactly basically what's happening. It's like, because he keeps splitting his soul, which makes him less and less human. So it's not that he doesn't have enough human left in him to die, it's that all the human parts of him have been spread into 8 other things.
Yes, yep, exactly.
Or 7 other things, I guess.
Right. So then we kind of go forward. We get a little bit more back and forth with Hagrid and the Dursleys, who are sort of like, kind of just having it out of as to whether or not this is going to happen.
Yep.
Hagrid has a cool line here where we can just give a little bit of backstory, but Hagrid said his name has been down ever since he was born.
Yep, I highlighted the exact same line. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because it means that Harry, upon being born, was immediately showing signs of magic.
Yes. And this is again kind of like further reading that you have to do in the deeper, wider wizarding world. However, you can go on to Pottermore and learn about the Quill of Admittance and Book of Acceptance.
Yep.
Do I have those the right way?
I think so.
Okay.
Those are all the right words.
All the right words. But the idea, I believe, is usually that the Quill will recognize when you have first like exhibited some amount of magical ability, and it won't be penned into the page until it's like fully confirmed that it's enough magical ability to attend the school.
The book and the quill both have to agree that you've like displayed enough magic to come to Hogwarts or something.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, it means that like from the word go, from the moment Harry was born, it was like beyond a shadow of a doubt. This
Harry
boy
Potter
is magical. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what determines like whether or not you get your letter. Conversely, though, I think we eventually find out that Neville's name doesn't get written in the book until he's like 8 or something.
Yeah, when his Uncle Algie drops him out of a window. By mistake, I believe, and he bounces.
But that's also kind of back to the car crash thing. It's like, what? A fall from a tower? Kill the Longbottoms? It's a scandal.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why would that wouldn't happen? Magic would protect them.
Magic would protect them. Yeah,
100%. No, yep, absolutely. We get Vernon. Honestly, is exhibiting quite a bit of bravery. All things being equal, he says, "I'm not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks," which is what Vernon is yelling at Hagrid.
Yeah, which I mean, what a misunderstanding of the system. I mean, it's absolutely free to go to Hogwarts.
Exactly. Like
you don't have to pay anything. I mean, I guess you have to buy the materials to go, but even that, it's like actually you don't, because Harry's just got a fortune of his own.
Right. I know. This is like one of those things where it's like, oh man, I almost wish Hagrid just dunks on them in this moment.
I know.
But of course, he's a bit more. His hackles kind of go up at the reference to Dumbledore as a crackpot old fool, and you get to just see like one of those like where like Hagrid's life, his livelihood, has been like so helped along throughout the years by Dumbledore's approval and support of him.
Yep.
And you can tell that runs awfully deep for Hagrid, who says never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me, which it's just like one of those kind of like I don't know what I love so much about it, but it's like the like absolute nature of allegiance between people is just something that like makes me happy.
Yeah.
And in this case, because I know all the people involved are good people, it's like, yes, okay.
Hooray.
Yeah. And again, it's just nice to see the Dursleys being taken down a notch.
Oh, I know. And then he tries to turn Dudley into a pig, and then has the fantastic line afterwards where he says, meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he was so much like a pig anyway, there wasn't much left to do. Which I just like, I love it. It's like, there's the constant like underflow of like magic has like a sense of humor about it, and it's like, yeah, we don't it's pretty much done, so tail.
right especially because he's like again, Hagrid has come in, he's done a decent bit of magic. I mean, he lit the fire,
Yeah.
He's done some stuff since they've been in the room, and he's done all those things just fine. But I guess Transfiguration, certainly a slightly more complex
Slightly more complex, but as far as he's concerned, there's a very reasonable explanation for it.
Right. Yes, yeah. It's like how similar are these two things? It's like, well, if it's pretty similar already, then
It's not like sympathy. It's not like I was like, no. So the more similar it is, the easier it is to do. It's like, as far as magic's concerned, it's like, you want me to turn the box into a trunk? Like it's already.
He's a box.
Like it's there.
It's pretty
We're
much
good.
a trunk. Yeah.
Pretty much there.
I'll trunkify your box, but it'll still be a box.
Yeah.
Because the box was the trunk in the first place.
Yeah.
So we get the line, of course, and we've kind of already touched on this. The snap my wand in half and everything, but Dumbledore let me stay on as gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore.
Great man, Dumbledore.
Great man, Dumbledore. And then that pretty much closes us out of the chapter.
It does. Harry does ask him, why were you expelled? And he just skates right past that, not willing to be like, oh, murder. Never mind. It's like, geez, Harry, wait for book 2. Why don't you, man?
I know, seriously, can you have some patience?
Gosh.
Like, we gotta leave some mysteries left to be solved. But yeah, so that'll of course we've got our little couple of dormice in one of the pockets.
Oh, I know. Why are you carrying mice around, man?
I know.
Yeah. Don't get it. I mean, my only explanation is that he would use it to feed the owls, but like also like Harry would, never. It's not like Harry's ever keeping mice up in his bedroom. If Hedwig needs to eat, he's just like, just go outside and just done.
Right, yeah. And it's funny too though, because if you know us, through any of our other works, you'll know that we're a big fan of the fantasy series Name of the Wind, and one of the like common tropes in Name of the Wind, not even tropes, but just things that come back to a lot, is cloaks with numerous little pockets.
Yes.
And it's like the idea like that, like you can always like a good wizard almost always has lots of little trinkets and objects kind of stashed away in their cloak. And so I actually reading this now, I do have a little bit of that like curiosity as to like whether or not this was like continuing that trope in the realm of fantasy novels a little bit, where it's sort of like carrying lots of stuff and lots of odd little pockets. It's like this is like what you do. This is like your source of a partial source of power. So I don't know if that's like a nod to that or at all, or if it's just a pure coincidence. But either way, I like Hagrid's coat full of stuff.
I do too. Like one of my favorite things in like any story is whenever the main character gets like a new like tool or object or like weapon or something. Yeah, it always feels like, oh, you got another little thing to put in your arsenal. That's super fun. Like Harry gets the cloak, and then he gets the map, and eventually he has the sword, and it's like just getting all these little power ups all over the place.
I know. Yeah, it's like you're like actively like playing the video game
exactly,
and getting all those power ups as you go. That being said, as long as we're talking about the coat, we can talk a little bit about the chapter art.
Oh yeah,
as ever, we have a glorious photo of
shot of Hagrid
who has dustbin-sized hands and feet the size of baby dolphins.
Is that what it says? Feet the size of baby dolphins?
I believe it does.
I think you're right.
Yeah. I think that's the description.
I really like the owl on his shoulder here, because its eyes are just going every which way in the chapter art.
Yeah.
It's just like, brr. really kind of derpy looking owl.
You get, yeah, I know it's true. You get a glorious shot of the umbrella as well, which is just great. I call it 11 out of 10 in terms of chapter heart.
Fantastic. Really captures the magnitude of the man, as it were.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Although as we do look ahead to chapter 5, we have Diagon Alley as next week's episode.
Diagonally.
Diagonally.
I feel like when they say that, like they're like, what a yeah. I thought that's what he said. That's a completely unreasonable mistake to make. But I think that's what he said.
Yes,
like in their mind, like Diagon Alley and diagonally are complete. There's just no reason at all. Those even sound the same.
That to me almost felt like one of these things where like people met Diagon Alley and found it to be wonderful and whimsical, and nobody was not nearly enough people were putting together the wordplay, which was diagonally.
Yeah.
And I almost felt like it was like, all right, are people not getting what's going on?
Yeah.
Like do they not see the sheer cleverness of this name?
Right.
It's like, well, I'm gonna make you.
Yeah.
Like we're on book 2. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hayra's gonna accident himself right on over into Nocturnally. It's the same game. It's the exact same thing.
Oh. Nocturnally. Yeah, I love it.
Nocturnally.
Yep. No, so it's amazing wordplay. I'm very excited. And this is like, speaking of watching your character gain all of the new little power-ups, all the new abilities, like going shopping in the wizarding world when Harry just a day ago had no idea this aspect of himself.
Oh, I know.
And the very next day he's out shopping for cauldrons and wands and robes. Like nothing in my mind could be better. So I'm looking forward to delving into, again, Chapter 5, Diagon Alley.
Oh, I know. We get to meet some brand new characters in here. We get to meet Ollivander. We get to meet Draco Malfoy.
True. I know. It's exciting. It's going to be a big chapter for sure.
Yes, it
is. But Jay, do you have a review?
I sure do, Ben.
Oh, boy. Okay,
all
lay
right.
it on me.
So this review is from, I think I'm saying it right, Neve, just Neivh, Neve. Just says, so ready for this. A perfect opportunity for my fiance to get his first reread of the series in almost 20 years. We love the Carlin Bros, and I took place in their walking challenge over the summer and had a blast, and I know I'll have a blast with this podcast too.
Amazing. Yeah, we had a really fun event earlier this year that hopefully we'll be able to do again in the future, called our Miles Managed Step Competition. It was really cool. We basically like charted course from platform 9 3/4, well, King's Cross Station, rather, in London, and ran it all the way up, kind of the coastline of England to sort of remote Scotland, to a specific set of coordinates that we once found to be as like our like believed to be location of the Hogwarts castle.
That video was so fun because like the idea is that like you're not supposed to know where Hogwarts castle is specifically, but it's sort of like it's up there. It's in the north. It's
right. Yeah, like Scotland, the mountains,
Scotland,
in the lochs.
It's in the mountains, and there's a lake, and there's that, and so there we found like a specific lake that has a castle that looks ruined on it, and it's like on this little island, and it's like, oh no, of course it has to look like a ruined castle because that's what it would look like to Muggles. Right. And then like because it's on an island, it's like the island is so little. If you go on like Google Maps, like you can't drop yourself on the island itself, but you can like drop yourself on like a piece of shoreline near it. And there was this I think it was just like a glitch in Google Maps on that day. But we tried it on a few computers, and it happened on all of them. Where like if you put yourself on the piece of the map closest to the island and try to like spin around, there was like you could see literally everything like from the 360 view. You could look around and see all the trees behind you, but like the one square where the castle should be like would not load no
on
matter
any
what.
Screen.
And
it was like what is
happening?
On?
Like it's like being magically concealed. That's what's happening. It's messing with Google Maps. Like it's magic at work. So that was our exact coordinates confirmed of Hogwarts Castle. If you want to check out that video, that was a super fun one.
It was really cool. Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. So back to Neve's, description of our step competition. So we basically had like a 120-mile journey. So as you would walk out in the real world, your progress would be mapped on like a little dot traveling up the coast, and we had like all these little checkpoints along the way, and like little things you could interact with, and it was really fun. It was a cool community thing. I think we had over 5,000 people participate.
It was fun,
which was really amazing.
There was medals if you finished.
There were indeed. Yeah, so really great event. So something to hopefully look forward to. In future years to come, we'll be sure to let you know about it if and when that does become a reality. But otherwise, guys, I think that is all for this week, and until next week in Chapter 5, which again is Diagon Alley.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us. If you want to leave us a review, maybe we'll read it here on the show. But otherwise, we look forward to Chapter 5, Diagon Alley, here on Through the Griffin Door. Welcome, dear listeners. I'm Jonathan Carlin.
And I'm Ben Carlin.
And we invite you to join us through the Griffin Door, your one-way ticket to the enchanting world of Harry Potter. So grab your wands, dust off your broomsticks, and join us as we unlock the secrets behind Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 5, Diagon Alley.
Ooh,
man.
We are officially like in the wizarding world.
We are there. We are like entering in. But before we get into the wizarding world, I just want to say thank you to all of our listeners out there, because like as of recording this, it is the week after the podcast has officially launched, and we've just sort of been looking at the numbers every day. Like as of this morning, we were ranked number 67.
67 on the overall Spotify
on
chart.
The overall Spotify chart. So that's amazing. So thank you so much to everyone who's listening out there. I could not believe it. I think my wife was like nerding out too when she texted me. It's like, you guys are number 2 on the Apple Books charts and number 7 in the arts charts. So maybe it was number 3. I don't know. But it was just like, what is happening? That's so cool.
Just a really great feeling. So it's so exciting to see like everybody tuning in and being excited about the new show, which just makes us that much more excited to kind of keep the ball rolling here with Chapter 5, Diagon Alley, where we wake up in the hut on the rock out in the middle of sea.
This chapter is loaded with things that happen. Like I went down to do like a little summary, and I was like, oh yeah, this happened. So here's everything. Just a quick breakdown of everything that happens off the cuff is they leave the hut on the rock, go to Diagon Alley, meet Professor Quirrell, visit Gringotts for the first time, get the Sorcerer's Stone, meet Malfoy, buy Hedwig, and Harry gets his wand.
It's a
like,
lot.
So much happens.
In a lot of ways, I feel like Harry getting his wand by itself could be its own chapter.
Oh my gosh. It really could. Yeah, it could have been like, only one thing left, Harry. We got to get your wand. Chapter 6, the Wand Maker.
Right. Yeah. And it's just like a quietly short chapter, but that's not really how these books work. Like there's a lot at any given point in time. I feel like several chapters could be, or one chapter could be several chapters. But
this is like a real symptom of Philosopher's Stone too, where like it is a much shorter book, and like the end result is that every chapter is packed with like a lot of different things happening.
There is, and the other theme that continued, and I'll try to spot them as I go, is that I feel like these early first 5 chapters or so are just absolutely cram-packed with obscure little trivia facts that come
back in such big ways later on.
Yes, it's wild.
I was this comes back. There's so many, and like the first 5 chapters of Philosopher's Stone, they set up so many things for Deathly Hallows.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yep. So, but yeah, the chapter kicks off with Harry sort of like in this half dreamlike state, where he's kind of got that like dreadful crushing feeling, which is that like it was just all a dream. That must be the case. Like I dreamed that I was a wizard and that I was going to get to be taken away, and like this will all be better. Which always brings about one of my favorite questions, which is just simply, is it better or worse to wake up from a good dream or a bad dream?
Oh,
it's
right.
Like when you wake up from a good dream and you're like, oh, it was just a dream.
Oh man.
But then you like wake up from a bad dream and you're still stressed from everything you just felt inside of the bad dream.
If you wake up from a good dream, you're like, oh God, I just wish I was was still dreaming. There's no good answer.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's either which way, but I relate to Harry's sensation there. Like I feel I've had that on so many occasions where you wake up and you're like, oh, it's just a dream.
Yeah. Man, so I think it's interesting because he says when he's imagining that he's going to wake up and it's going to have all been a dream, he says, I'll wake up at home in my cupboard, which to me, it's like, so at this point, he's already gotten the new room too.
Oh, that's
so
true.
Back, in his mind, the dream has consisted of not just Hagrid showing up and telling him he's a wizard, but also the letters arriving and all, and him getting a new room and stuff like that. All of it's been a dream.
All of it's been a dream. Yeah. I know. Yeah. So he's going way back.
He's going way back.
I've been out for a minute.
I'm not even 11 yet. Jeez.
Yep. Right away though, we learn or we see owl mail kind of coming into effect with the delivery of the Daily Prophet, which is kind of like one of those just funny exchanges where Hagrid's like, "There's money in my coat."
Yeah.
Look in the pockets, and then like his coat is just like full of pockets.
Yeah.
Which once again is like one of these things where we're big fans of the story Name of the Wind, where cloaks with pockets are like always regarded as a good thing.
Yeah. Is that just like a fantasy trope? Just like, oh, someone has a coat with that's mostly just pockets.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like Hagrid's coat is exactly that.
Hagrid's coat is that. Yeah.
That's like one of those things. I always remembered it, and I don't know why. I always remembered it as if the delivery for the Daily Prophet was a single Knut. So when I saw 5 Knuts, I was like, man, it's expensive to take out a subscriction here.
Or is it? I mean, it's the money in this chat. I mean, money in the Wizarding world
Jay,
is always
it's easy enough.
What's so infuriating is that later in this chapter, Hagrid's explaining the base 17 currency system they have going. It's like 20. Is it 29 nuts to a sickle, 17 sickles to a galleon?
Yes.
First of all, that doesn't make sense at all. They're not even divisible. You've used 2 different prime numbers, Wizarding World. That's bananas. But at the same time, Hagrid is having trouble figuring out the Muggle money. And it's like, well, whatever they say that, I'm like, I don't understand, because it's just it's just numbers. It like what are you not understanding? You use the same numbers.
It's funny though, because I'm also reading Project Hail Mary at the same time, and there's just this tiny little sequence where it talks about the fact that humans operate in base 10, and the only reason we operate in base 10 at all is just simply because we have 10 fingers.
Yes, yeah.
And so like that is like one of those things where it's like we see 10 as a round number because that's how we've been taught from the very beginning. So who knows? Maybe if you just always learned currency this way,
maybe. But at the same rate though, it's like we have a base 10. We use that, but then like our measurement system is not. We use like 12 inches, and it's like that continues to be baffling the whole time.
Oh yeah. That's just entirely confusing.
Yeah.
So, but I also feel like this is part of like the irregularity. Like we talked about it in one of the earlier chapters, but it's sort of like how Petunia has this like obsession with like overly cleanliness, and it feels like part of like what the charm of the Wizarding World is that it is a bit messy.
Yeah.
And nothing is that much messier than prime numbers.
That I do like that explanation for it. That there's something like magical about the complete nonsense of the currency system.
That's my subscription.
I like that.
I think I buy into that.
That's a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, so things in his pockets. I thought this was interesting. It lists slug pellets, bunches of keys, balls of string, and peppermint humbugs, which just stood out to me because just yesterday, as we're recording this, we did a trivia show where one of the questions was, what is the one thing Harry doesn't touch at the Hogwarts feast? And it's peppermint humbugs, which makes it sound like peppermint humbugs are a wizard thing that they're serving at Hogwarts. So I feel like this is maybe just like one of those tiny mistakes where it's like how like Harry shouldn't be able to identify what a peppermint humbug is yet.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So this would be a question.
Or is it a British thing?
I was going to say, or just a question for British listeners is are peppermint humbugs more similar to like your classic like peppermint hard candy that's sort of like the white circle with like the like little red stripes along the edges?
Right.
Because that's something I've never considered before, but peppermint humbugs does come across to me as seeming more magical, but you're right. Like Harry couldn't have identified peppermint humbugs.
Right, because he doesn't know anything yet. He can't even identify the Knuts.
Okay, so there's that.
Okay.
I don't want to jump too far forward, but I did. There is like one like money related. It's not really an error, but it's kind of like a funny little like slip up, and I caught it because I both read and listened to the chapter. And at one point, as they're in Diagon Alley, someone is shaking their head as they're passing by, saying "Dragon liver." 16 sickles to an ounce, they're mad. In the audiobook, it actually says 17 sickles to an ounce.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, which is funny because
just because that'd be 1 galleon.
it's the same as saying like, oh, like that would be the same as like going to a vending machine for like a soft drink and being like, oh, it cost 100 cents.
Yeah.
instead of like $1. So I was like, that's really funny because my copy of the book says 16 sickles, so it's clearly been corrected.
Yeah.
However, at whatever time Jim Dale recorded it, it said 17. So I was like, that's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. I like that.
Little,
Good catch. Good catch.
Thank you.
Man, okay, so going on with money, Harry realize. First of all, I love as they're leaving the hut on the rock. There's just a couple of things about it. Is that one, they completely, there's no goodbye to the Dursleys at all.
Oh, which I never have caught that before.
Yeah,
and I was
I know.
like, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I'm like, were they still there? Like, did they leave? It's like, no, they're still there. They just get up and leave. They don't even talk to them at all, which I think is hilarious. And then they go outside, and Hagrid's like, oh yeah, we'll have to take this boat. I was allowed to do a little magic to get here, and Harry's like, how'd you get here? And he says, flew, which is like not helpful. And this is one of those things where whether you're listening to it or reading it, maybe there could be some confusion because just the word flew as a form of travel might be FLOO, like flu powder, which obviously Hagrid didn't use anyway because he would have come in through the fireplace if that was the case. But what he means is FLEW, flew, which is also just a giant question mark because like how did you fly? I think Hagrid specifically at one point later on in the series says that, you know, there's no broomstick that could hold me. Like, just look at me, you know.
The only thing, because I literally remember, wait, what? And then I was like, Thestrals maybe.
But then why wouldn't he keep the Thestral there?
Well, you could, but it would be invisible. So I don't know, like to Harry, it would be invisible to Harry at this point in time. So like,
that's interesting. But
So it technically could still be there.
It could still be there.
The other thing about Thestrals is they have an excellent sense of direction. So like if all Hagrid had told them was I need to go find Harry Potter, similar to owls, it should have been able to do so.
Dude, I love that. I had not considered Thestrals. I was like, there's no way Hagrid can fly. Like, he can't ride on a broom. He didn't use the motorbike. Like, and if he can fly, then he can do insanely powerful magic because that's like a Voldemort signature thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's that.
Dude, you're right. Yeah. It is 1,000% a Thestral, which is just still invisible and just flies its way back.
You want to know what else is so cool about this that makes it doubly awesome is the fact that they normally, when you get to school as your first year, you take a boat, which is what they end up doing. But past your first year, you're in the Thestral-drawn carriages.
Yeah.
So like the two ways that Hagrid enters and exits are the two ways that you might approach Hogwarts Castle. Yeah. So it's
enters on the Thestral, exit on the boat. I also love that they take the boat because it means they just strand the Dursleys there. And like, they don't have cell phones. And the whole point of this place is that it is remote. So how do they get off the island? No idea. I guess the guy who rented the house to them eventually is like, I really want my boat back. I'll have to come in my other boat. Oh, your son's got a tail. That's weird.
It's just a real shocker for that man.
And yet they must get off pretty quickly because Hagrid and Harry are only gone for the rest of this one day, at which point Harry returns to the Dursleys at number 4 Privet Drive. So they get off the island?
That makes me think that it must be the case that somehow Hagrid re-delivered the boat back to him, like
just
possibly
like rocketed it back.
Yeah, like unmanned, just sort of like sent it backwards. Because you're right, like this is one of those big deviations from the films where when Harry normally goes with Hagrid, he goes and spends his whole day, but he never goes back to the Dursleys. Hagrid just like literally was like, "And here's your ticket. Good luck at school." And then that's just it. But in this case, Harry has to go back to the Dursleys for a full month before he gets
there for a while.
Yeah, eventually boarding the.
You know
Hogwarts
what?
Express.
I'm reading the section again though. He says flew, but then he says, "Yeah, but we'll go back in this. I'm not supposed to use magic now. I've got you." And it's like, but you wouldn't have had to have used magic to fly on a Thestral.
But I still think Harry couldn't
Yeah.
see it, so I
Harry
don't know if that could
couldn't
be
see-
like off-putting or something.
It
but
absolutely could be.
th-
All
th-
right.
yeah,
I'm still
anyway.
going with Thestral. That's
Okay.
got to be it.
Yeah, but then we get like a little bit more of like how much can we rely on everything that Hagrid says a couple paragraphs later where he starts talking about how like Harry's concerned because he doesn't have any money and Hagrid's basically like, oh, don't worry, you have plenty at Gringotts. We're going to go there today. And he's like, explaining it, and saying like there's no place safer and stuff like that. But then he says Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's
Hundreds
like,
of miles?
I'm sorry. Hundreds is too many.
Hundreds
Like,
is too many.
Hundreds, and so I was curious. I was like, how? I mean, this is like one of those things where it's like I don't know off the top of my head how many miles it is to the center of the Earth, but I started just doing like some reading just to be like, if you were hundreds of miles under the Earth, then what would like the relative temperature be? Because at some point in time, you go from like the standard temperature underground, which I think like in a cave is like 56 or 57
yeah.
degrees or something like that. We've done some caving in our day.
We have.
But then obviously the further that you go, it starts to get hotter and hotter and hotter. After a certain distance, it's like 8 degrees hotter every extra mile you go or something like that. Anyway, so it wouldn't be intolerably hot at 100 miles, but it would be hotter.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned is just how squashed our planet actually is, because when you're standing on the equator, you're actually a lot further from the center of the Earth than you are when you're standing on like one of the north or south poles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like considerably. Like
it's more of an egg?
it's more. Yeah, it's like more of like a squished. It's like a squished egg or
Wow.
something.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I just learned something about our planet.
Ben's an egg earther. I love that he says, they set up like right away. One of the first things he tells them about Gringotts is, yes, he'd be mad to try and rob it. And it's like that they basically just set up, well, not only the events of this book, but also the events of Deathly Hallows, when sure enough, Harry has to try and rob it. And he says, never mess with goblins. And it's like, well, Harry is going to mess with goblins at some point.
Yeah, he thinks that there could be a dragon. He's heard rumor of that, and that we know that we eventually will learn that there is in fact a dragon down there.
Yes, indeed. Okay, this is something I thought, I noticed this for the first time as we were reading through it. He says, you got to find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London Sea, deep under the underground. Okay, maybe I read that wrong. But in any case, Dumbledore in chapter 1 says that he has a map of the London Underground on like his leg as like a scar,
like a scar
or something.
Yep.
Which is like, and then I was like, which I've always just assumed was like the subway system.
Yeah, I believe
London.
that is. Yep.
Yeah, but then I was reading this and I was like, I wonder if what he actually has is a map of like Gringotts scarred on his leg.
Oh, that would have been if all he had said was deep underground or something.
Yeah.
But no, but it's under the underground.
Under the underground. So
Yeah.
never mind. Forget that.
Right.
My bad.
The next little thing we get here, though, was the Ministry of Magic messing things up as usual.
Oh, I know. They're just introduced as this fumbling government.
Yes, absolutely, like right away. And it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, he like Cornelius Fudge gets the job, but like he's referred to as a bungler, which is a term I've never heard before. Well, apparently I have because I've read the story so many times, but it never comes to mind when I think of a go-to insult for somebody. But he pelts Dumbledore's with owls every morning asking for advice. This is kind of like one of those things where it's like, did you just trip on your own logic a little bit, Hagrid? Like if he's always asking Dumbledore for advice, and Dumbledore, I mean, assuming Dumbledore is providing said advice, then you would think that the Ministry of Magic wouldn't always be messing things up as usual, because Fudge would just be doing whatever Dumbledore told him to do.
I want to know what they're doing that's messing things up, because he just says Ministry's messing things up as usual, but like with no context. And it's like in this book, they don't really specifically do anything wrong that we know of. Like clearly they are bumbling and they make all sorts of mistakes moving forward. But like that, there's like, I wonder what happened on this particular day.
That's an interesting question. Yeah. So I guess we'll have to keep that like burning in the back of our brain and see if we end up finding some explanation as to what would be going on, because we know that the events of this very day are about to make some headlines.
Yes, they are.
But we don't know of anything happening prior to this very day that would do the same. So anyway, we make our way to London, which Harry has never been to before, which I know is kind of like one of those things, like when they go to the zoo for Dudley's birthday, it just simply means they didn't go to the London Zoo because Harry has never been to London before.
Oh, right, yeah. So we can just rule that out.
You can just rule that out. So it went to some other zoo, not the London Zoo.
There's all sorts of like weird little things like that. Or like this is another one that I think is odd, is that like they talk about, this is moving forward a Chamber of Secrets, but like they talk about like going to find the Ford Anglia in the parking lot at King's Cross, and it's like, King's Cross does not have a parking lot at all.
Yeah,
It's just in the middle of the city.
Right. You need to wait for the car to be there.
Yeah,
It's fine.
it's cool. Whatever.
Yeah.
We can move right past that.
Right. One of the things I like that they set up early is Hagrid's love of dragons. Crikey,
Yep.
I love a dragon. And I like the use of the word crikey here because it is like a classic like Steve Irwin exclamatory.
Yeah.
And Steve Irwin, of course, was like a big like animal guy. Obviously, it's the primary thing he's known for. So I love the use of the word crikey just simply because I have always assumed crikey to be an Australian word, but Hagrid also loves beasts. So his use of it
Is it
here,
a beast word?
yeah, is this like a beast or like a little? Is it like a Steve Irwin reference possibly?
I don't know.
I found that to be kind of fun.
I know. I love that he says I wanted one ever since I was a kid. And it's like, and you know what? Didn't get to settled for a giant spider. So there's that.
Yep, we know that much.
Moving on.
We get the Hagrid getting on the subway and knitting what looks like a yellow circus tent.
Yeah. Like, what's he making?
Yeah, this is like, Hagrid is known in the future for his like baking and like, kind of like engaging in like lots of like little things that feel like juxtapositions for like this big
right.
like character. But so I love just the image of him knitting here. Interestingly though, I have actually read a little bit before about this because we never learn in the books specifically which house Hagrid was in, and I have seen before a lot of speculation based on this particular line that because he's knitting in yellow that Hagrid was actually a Hufflepuff, which is also kind of interesting because you get the line where Harry is ultimately asking about like the specific houses.
Yeah.
And like I think Hagrid says like everyone says Hufflepuff's a bunch of like duffers, but and then like I think like Harry cuts him off at like that point in time or something. So it's like was Hagrid about to be like, but I was one, so
but, yeah, right. So there's that.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things on Pottermore he's confirmed to have been in Gryffindor.
That is that is correct.
But boy oh boy, we can get to this later. I don't buy it at all. I think Hagrid was in Slytherin, man.
It seems like there's a very real possibility.
There is so much evidence that Hagrid was in Slytherin, and it is just there's just no way he was in. I mean, if that's what they say, then maybe that's the case. But there's so much Slytherin.
We have a strong argument for it, but we'll
save that. We'll save that one.
Yeah.
We're getting way ahead of ourselves here,
as we tend to do.
Yep.
The next page, though, as we move forward, we get the famous list of school supplies that Harry is going to need for his first year. This particular list is I always find it to be incredibly interesting because there's a couple of like known like questions attached to it.
Yeah.
In one of the earliest printings of the book, there was a very famous misprint which sort of marks some of the more collectible issues of the book, which is that under other equipment, they actually listed one wand as something needed twice. So it would say like one wand, one cauldron, one set of glass, one telescope, one set of brass scales, and one wand.
And one wand.
And
like, wait, what?
Yeah.
2 1 wands?
2 1 wands.
Wand wands.
Immediately under that, we also have students may bring an owl or a cat or a toad.
Or a rat, I guess, if you want.
Yeah.
Ron.
Or is Ron just breaking the rules? Like, I find it to be really funny that that's something that
What's extra funny is that Percy gave him the rat. So Percy was breaking the rules.
Also, yeah.
Managed to become prefect anyway.
I know.
Wow.
So that's like I was like, why is that overlooked?
Yeah.
The other things that we have that kind of stand out to me a little bit are the inclusion of the textbook The Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander.
Absolutely.
This one is always fascinating because you don't start Care of Magical Creatures until year 3, and even in year 3 there is a different textbook for that class.
Yeah, so it's like, why do they in what class are they using Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them? Like, arguably Defense Against the Dark Arts, because like when Lupin's teaching them, mostly what he teaches them about is like dangerous beasts. So
I've always thought that too. Yeah,
could be
like
it.
Red caps and hinky punks and stuff. Yeah.
Either way, it's clearly also the first time you hear about the book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which goes on to become the movie, and we get to meet a lot more of Newt in the movies there. This is also the first time you hear about Bathilda Bagshot of A History of Magic, who it turns out is a pretty important character herself.
Yep. Adalbert Waffling, I believe, is another one of the characters that Dumbledore is supposedly having correspondence with before even leaving his time at Hogwarts. So that's just like a fun little Easter egg there, where when it comes back up later, you're like, oh my gosh, like one of the guys he was talking to literally has a first year book that they need.
Look, if Dumbledore's the one making this list and he includes Adalbert Waffling and Newt Scamander and Bathilda, it's almost surprising he includes Bathilda Bagshot on the list here, given his relationship with like Grindelwald.
That,
you know, because that's Grindelwald's aunt.
Yeah, that's
he
true.
clearly doesn't have a very good relationship with her. But I guess she's, you know, they're not all evil. Obviously, Harry's parents were friends with Bathilda Bagshot as well. So
that's very true.
That.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Let's see. So as we keep going forward, we make our way to the Leaky Cauldron, which I just wrote like a little note here because one of the fun things that we did when we were in our trip to London years ago now for the History of Magic exhibit at the British Library was we got to go to the physical location.
Yes, we did. This was so cool
because it's not really noteworthy all that much at all. Like it's the type of place you might visit on like a Harry Potter films like walking tour of London or something similar, but it was just very interesting to like see the exterior of the place and then like look at it in the film and be like, wow,
well, we were there.
Yeah, we were there, but they like really change it for the film. Yeah,
but it is like it. I mean, the point of it in the book is that it's really innocuous and like Muggles won't notice, and like sure enough, in real life you won't notice.
Yeah, no, it's you could walk right past it and have no idea that it was a place worth remarking over. So, kind of just a fun little detail that I wrote down there.
This is another tiny little detail that I recently learned is that they're talking about walking past music stores, hamburger restaurants, and cinemas. Hamburger is a word that pops up in these first like 5 chapters like 5 times. Like the use of the word hamburger is there a lot, and then it is never used again. Like it is an extremely Muggle sounding word that came up a lot until Harry got to Hogwarts, and then never again.
I know, yeah, which is just absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
So yep, a little bit of inclusion of the word hamburger that's about to just go extinct for the rest of the series.
We also meet Tom, the bartender at the Leaky Cauldron, which is just one of those like it's like a throwaway character. You wouldn't think about it, and it's like, but the fact that his name is Tom is like specifically relevant to Voldemort choosing to not be called Tom Riddle.
Yes, because like what drives Voldemort crazy about the name Tom is that there are a lot of Toms.
Right. So this is an example of one of the, I think the example of the other Tom.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, realistically, especially because Tom Riddle is having a very similar experience to Harry in that he is eventually an orphan, you know, going to Diagon Alley. He goes by himself, and the first person he's likely to meet inside the wizarding world is someone who shares his name.
Oh gosh, he would hate that. I've never even thought about that. You're right. It's probably the first person he met.
Yep. Other than Dumbledore.
Yeah. Okay. So then this is another interesting thing is that everyone at the Leaky Cauldron, Hagrid doesn't say he's there with Harry. He just says, "I'm on Hogwarts business," and like taps Harry on the shoulder. And suddenly everyone's like, "Good Lord. Is that Harry Potter?"
Right.
And it's like they all immediately know what he looks like, to which it's just like, how? How does everyone know what he looks like? I don't understand. No one's seen him.
All I can think, because I had the same note here, is that like, you know, like as Hagrid walks in, Tom is just like the usual Hagrid, and Hagrid's like, "Can't Tom? I'm on Hogwarts business." And it's like if Hagrid is enough of a regular at the Leaky Cauldron for Tom to say like you know, the usual, then it's entirely possible that Hagrid has known he would have this mission for a minute, and upon saying like, "I'm on official Hogwarts business," it's like this is Harry Potter. This is the one I was telling you about.
Yeah, that could be the case. But like, I get that almost makes more sense because like you'd think if this is the reaction and everyone just knows what he looks like, then the moment he gets into Diagon Alley, he'd be swarmed by everyone immediately. And yet it's like in the Leaky Cauldron, everyone recognizes him. Once they go into Diagon Alley, nobody recognizes him.
He does kind of get by,
he gets by. Too much. The other thing is that like this is sort of like one of those like it feels like it doesn't quite add up, but it could just be that. But when he's talking to Malfoy later at Madame Malkin's, it's like Malfoy is otherwise an extremely well-informed child per Wizarding World's 11-year-old standards.
Sure.
Like he normally has more information than Harry and Ron or Hermione usually have just because his dad tells him everything. And yet Malfoy doesn't recognize Harry Potter in a world where people who haven't seen him do recognize him. And this is like the son of a Death Eater. So it's like he I don't know why he doesn't recognize him.
And what's especially interesting about that, and we'll come back to Leaky Cauldron in a little bit because he meets Quirrell. We have to talk about that.
We definitely talk about that.
One of the big things about Harry in his return to the Wizarding World, especially as you get like into the back catalog of information, like on Pottermore about like what's happening and like how the rest of like the Death Eaters and everything might be viewing him, is like in a lot of ways the Death Eaters were people who were looking for the biggest, baddest guy on the playground to like band together around to sort of like seek power around. And a lot of rumors were flying that like because Harry was able to take down Voldemort, that like it was very possible that Harry was going to be like the new second coming of the Dark Lord.
Right.
And so at this point in time, like, you know, everybody's kind of watching with bated breath to see like, you know, what does this boy end up doing? Like, what will he embody? And yeah, like how will he be relevant? And so especially through the lens of young Draco here, it has to be the case that Lucius like is very much aware of the fact that he has a child the same age as the Harry Potter. And it would not surprise me in the slightest if Lucius wasn't instructing Draco on his behalf to be like, look, there's going to be a kid in your class. You need to be like on him, like, you know.
Yeah. And like, sure enough, it seems like he does have the conversation with him like after this encounter, because then when Draco finds out that, you know, oh, it's true what they're saying on the train, Harry Potter has come to Hogwarts. It's like he is like on him like immediately, like, I'll be your best friend, Harry.
That's true. And I mean, I think really what's most likely in this particular situation is that Draco is so self-absorbed and smarmy and awful that like I could see a world where he can't imagine that he's meeting somebody more important than himself.
Well, that's absolutely the case too. Yeah. I think he barely looks up at him. But anyway, back to the Leaky Cauldron, because sure enough, we meet a very important character, Mr. Professor Quirrell.
Yes, and this is like one of those really, really, really interesting ones, because like Quirrell is, I think, very strategically placed inside of the story to where like he has a lot of relevance, but Harry doesn't have a very particular relationship with him as a teacher.
Yeah.
Like, so we don't get like a lot of time between Harry and Quirrell, and it's like he's the first one we're really introduced to, and he like comes across as like so innocuous and non-dangerous.
Oh yeah, I mean you meet him and then are immediately dissuaded away from him as like a threat at all.
Exactly. Yeah. There is one of the like the age-old questions attached to this particular exchange, which basically is Professor Quirrell steps forward and says, Potter stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you. This is like one of those things where it's like we know this story will culminate with basically the key thing that Harry has is that Voldemort can't stand to
physically touch Harry.
Physically touch him. So what it must tell us is at this point in time, Quirrell is already being impacted by the potential control that Voldemort will eventually have over him. But I also think because Harry doesn't have like the splitting scar moment either, and because they're able to physically touch, it must be the case that at this point in time, Voldemort is not actively occupying Quirrell's body.
I think that has been confirmed as well. You're right, because you're right. Like if Voldemort was already possessing him, then he should not be able to shake Harry's hand without, basically losing it.
I mean, like at this point in time, like Harry would accidentally defeat Voldemort 35 seconds into the Wizarding World.
Right. Whoops. See
like, well, how about, and Hagrid would be like,
what do you know?
Who are you?
Right. Yeah. Like, wow, Harry, really impressive. So basically what's happened here is that Quirrell has met Voldemort. And in fact, the reason he's at the Leaky Cauldron and Diagon Alley at all on this day is because this is the day he is going to go personally try and rob Gringotts. So it is not actually a coincidence that he's there. He's there for that reason.
Yes. Yep, you're exactly right. It's a good point.
So there is that. They do shake hands. Voldemort isn't possessing him yet. Voldemort starts living on the back of his head because he fails to steal the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yes,
I believe is like the extended Pottermore explanation for what happens here. At which point, Quirrell is, for like the duration of the year, a Horcrux.
Right. Yes. At least sort of like a stand-in Horcrux. We made a whole video about it once upon a time, but you're right. It's always one of those big questions. It's like, was Quirrell technically a Horcrux? And he is.
Yeah.
For a period of time, just sort of like unofficially one, because he is effectively
like housing Voldemort Prime.
Yes, yeah. We've always referred to like the consciousness of Voldemort as Voldemort Prime, and that is the one that is existing within Quirrell. So it's a little bit different than like the piece that might be like in the diary for comparison's sake. As we move forward and enter Diagon Alley, there's the 3 up, 2 across, which is the tapping of the bricks to get into Diagon Alley. I just write that down as a bit of trivia. That's always one of those where
always
it's like
good trivia.
What is the pattern that you need to do in order to enter the wizarding world. We've got the entrance into Diagon Alley, which is just like, honestly, this is one of those things that, like, if you've ever been to Universal, and enter Diagon Alley, like the way that they've designed the parks is so spectacular, and that like it's a pretty innocuous entry point into Diagon Alley.
It's so cool.
Yeah,
it's so cool. The first time we ever went, we were like on the Hogsmeade side of things, so we didn't quite get this reveal.
Yes.
Yeah, but oh my gosh, it could make you cry walking in. It is so cool.
I tear up. I mean, truly, yeah. It's like you're here, and it's amazing, and it's like it's so full and bustling. But it's so cool because it's like it's almost like Universal was willing to rely on the fact that people will figure out where to go, and sure enough, when you step through, it is packed.
Yeah,
like nobody's not finding it. It's not a secret. Like everybody knows it's there.
Everyone knows it's there.
But
there's the night bus parked on the other side, I guess.
That's true. So there's some.
You fell over for.
Classic.
Anyway, so now we're in Diagon Alley. We're walking down the street. I've made a note here that I think it's odd nobody recognizes Harry, but we already sort of talked about that. This is like one of those funny little anachronistic things where this book came out in 1997. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. So the kids are looking through the window with the broomsticks, and they're saying, "Oh, the new Nimbus 2000, fastest ever!" And it's like, okay, that's like, if you were alive in 1997, you were very aware that the year 2000 was coming soon. So everything was called 2000.
It was a really common naming convention at the time.
You can, for sure. It feels like it was written with that in mind. However, in universe, it's only the year 1991. So it's sort of weird that Nimbus called their broomstick the Nimbus 2000, especially because in 1992, they're like, well, we may as well just 2001 it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, or did you guys just found this company like 2,000 years prior, and now it's just lining up ever so slightly close to?
Man, that would be impressive. They just started just before they started the years. they're like 10 off.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, geez. We were founded in 9 BC.
Right. Yeah. Broomsticks actually outpace our calendar.
Yeah.
We get the really cool entry into Gringotts Bank, where you're getting to see like all the very clever goblins sort of like sorting and sifting through all the treasure. This as a kid, I loved treasure so very much. Like the idea of like the rubies the size of like coals and stuff like that. I'm just like, what? I want to be there.
Yes, I want to hold the jewels.
I want to hold jewels like that.
Right.
We learned about Vault 713.
Yep.
Which is the vault that the
Sorcerer's Stone is in.
Yeah, the Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone is stored inside of. One of the things that I did write down about this particular vault that I find to be interesting is that like it's very, very, very deep within the Gringotts vault. It's got to be like one of the more like original vaults for the school. But I do find it to be kind of interesting that like the only thing inside of it is the Philosopher's Stone, because almost certainly this vault has belonged to the school for a very, very long time, and it's almost like curious to me, like, what are they normally keeping here? Like, because it's in this particular case, it's like hey, we finally we have a use for 713.
Yeah,
but like in the meantime, is it just empty?
Yeah, I guess so. I have no idea.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I also think the number itself, 713, it like stands out a little bit to me. I mean, right away, like the number 7 is lucky and 13 is unlucky, so it's sort of like an interesting pairing of those numbers together right there. But then if you write it backwards, it's 317, and I think like the way in Europe they write dates is with the day of the month first and then the month.
Yes, you are correct.
In which case it would be 317, which is Harry's birthday.
Oh, that's so cool.
I know, which is so funny because Harry is the Philosopher's Stone, as we talked about back in chapter 1. Although I need to issue a quick correction on the Harry is the Philosopher's Stone theory, where I've said I think that Sirius physically picks Harry up, hands him to Hagrid, who then hands him to Dumbledore. Sirius never picks up Harry in when he's in the wreckage.
You're right.
Hagrid is there first. He fishes him out. Then Sirius shows up and says, "Give him to me, Hagrid. I'm his godfather." And he's like, "Nope, I'm taking him to Dumbledore. See ya." But it is still the first 3 characters who interact with him are Sirius, Hagrid and Dumbledore.
Good
So,
save.
There you
Good
go.
save. Yep,
Anyway.
yep, there we go. As we continue down to the vaults to get that precious Philosopher's Stone, there's just one line that I just found to be hilarious that never stands out to me, but I think is amazing. But they're seeing the stalactites and the stalagmites, and Harry says, "I never know like what's the difference between stalagmite and stalactite." And Hagrid says, "Stalagmites has got an M in it." I literally just wrote LOL next to it.
Oh my gosh. The actual difference is that stalactites hang tight to the ceiling and stalagmites might reach them one day.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
my fourth grade. Shout out to Miss Hall. I drew a little diagram on my book.
Oh, that's amazing.
For which ones are which.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. That's so great.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Oh, this was something I didn't note. I underlined as I was reading through it. When they get to Harry's vault, which I feel like isn't Harry's vault number always like a trivia question we have to deal with? I feel like it is. I don't think it's mentioned in the book, at least not here.
You're right. I was like, as you were saying the 713 thing, I was like, oh, when you go it backwards, is it Harry's vault number? And I was like, no,
it's.
Do we know Harry's vault number?
I don't know. All of a sudden, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be here, but it's not. But anyway, what I thought was interesting was Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. What is the green smoke?
What is the green smoke?
What is the green smoke in Harry's vault? Like, what protection did the Potters put on their gold? I want to know, because it's never mentioned again.
It never is mentioned.
Why is there green smoke in there?
Maybe they went and placed something in their vault, and then because it's been like 10 years since anybody's been to said vault, it just has rotted.
No, God, it feels like it's got to be a protection of some kind.
No, I agree with you.
I know,
yeah,
but
I feel like it's but it seems like it's not dangerous once the door has been opened as well.
Yeah, so it's like what? I mean, maybe if you were standing there and it like hit you, because I guess it doesn't touch them.
That's a good point. It's a good point. So,
but I don't know. Yeah. So I want to know. I'm trying to think if anything else in the Wizarding world makes a like green smoke.
Green smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is like one of those strange when we talked a little bit about the colors associated with Harry. Like, you know, he's got like the red from Gryffindor. He has the red Expelliarmus, but then he's got like the green eyes in contrast with Voldemort's, you know, red eyes and green spell of Avada Kedavra and green from, you know, Slytherin and everything. So the green is always interesting whenever it's attached to Harry in any capacity. So there's you know, worth keeping those notes in track. Yeah.
Know. This is where Hagrid also gives us the conversion rate between galleons, sickles, and knuts, which is bananas.
Yeah.
Still, I mean, seriously, if you were like, also just to get a single nut into a galleon is crazy, right? It's 17 times 29 nuts to a galleon.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's quite the
math I can just do in my head.
Not so much, but I mean, like, you know, if you were to think about like, you know, transferring, you know, pennies to a $10 bill or something, like, I mean, that's a lot of pennies.
I mean, it's a lot of pennies. Yeah, but I could still tell you how many it took.
No, that's a good point.
You know?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the currency is just wacky. There's
wacky.
No two ways about it.
No way
nothing,
about it.
Nothing costs what it's supposed to cost. We actually did just make an entire video where we broke down, like, if you were to take a galleon and just assume that it is the same shape and size as a British pound, and then we converted that amount of gold into a weight, and then we cross-referenced the current value of gold with that weight, then like a single gold galleon would be worth approximately $1,400,
which is crazy. I think in 1991 it was closer to like 300 or something.
Yeah,
right?
gold is really like skyrocketed. Over the past like 30 years.
Who knew? But yeah, in 2023, if a gold galleon is the same size as a British pound, then it is worth about $1,400 worth of gold.
Yes,
which is whoa.
I know, which is kind of amazing.
Harry is rich.
Harry is super wealthy.
Yeah,
which I think is true, kind of either way, depending on how you look at it. Speaking of wealthy, of course, then we go to Madame Malkin's, where we meet Malfoy.
I guess we don't learn his name just yet.
No, we don't. But
he's just some annoying turd.
What's a good word to a turd is
just a real butthead.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is particularly interesting, and we just made a video again about this, is also the early influence that Harry gets about the various houses.
Yeah, this is very. It's like there's so much that could have changed about Harry's whole life without this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's really the conversation with Malfoy that ultimately leads Harry to asking Hagrid about the various houses.
Yep.
And upon asking Hagrid about the houses is when Hagrid explains that, like, you know, not a witch or wizard who's ever gone bad wasn't in Slytherin or something, which is always one of those like double, triple negatives that can never like. I'm like, does that work? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Also, just not true. But.
Yeah, but also just not true. Yeah. Peter Pettigrew, anybody?
Quirrell.
Yeah, exactly. I guess technically those have not been found out about yet. So
No, I guess there's that, but whatever.
But still, it's
Lockhart's already doing his thing, you know.
You know what? Hagrid believed that Gringotts was hundreds of miles under London, so it's safe to give a couple of passes and assume that not everything Hagrid says is always dead accurate. But where am I going? Oh,
he believes Sirius Black is bad at this point.
True.
Yeah.
So
Gryffindor.
That's a good point. You got one.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
Well done. The bigger point I'm trying to make, though, is that there's a big conversation when it comes to Harry's eventual sorting, which we're going to get to in a little bit. And it just sort of is like these early bits of influence on Harry as he, you know, kind of moves towards his sorting are vital, because it's really like what we'll ultimately learn from like Dumbledore. You know, it's our decisions more than our talents that define who we truly are. Like Harry asking the Hat not to put him in Slytherin is in part informed based on these two exchanges, and then there's one more with Ron that's yet to come. But the point is that like you never really know why the Sorting Hat is debating on Slytherin fully, or if the piece of Voldemort's soul that exists inside of Harry is any part of like that sway or not. But like realistically, it seems very close. Like unless what the Hat eventually is doing, and I feel like I'm getting way too far ahead of myself right now, but unless what the Hat is really trying to do is just explain to Harry like why Slytherin isn't a bad choice, it always reads to me like if not for Harry's request, he was going into Slytherin.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah. And I mean, this was and this conversation right here was the basis. The one he's about to have with Malfoy was the basis for our entire what if Harry wasn't Slytherin. Like basically, what if Harry didn't meet Malfoy in Madame Malkin's, because that is when he first gets the information about Slytherin.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
So these are actually pretty important conversations that are all happening. You know, like in terms of framing. You know, I mean, Harry at this point in time is building the basic foundation of his knowledge of the wizarding world. I mean, he's getting like you know, he's drinking from a fire hose, as they say. Like in terms of all this new information is just stampeding over him.
Yeah.
But you know, as he's going forward, I mean, these are the like. Whenever you're into anything new, your first and earliest impressions are like,
lasting sometimes.
Lasting, exactly. So
there, it is a pretty big conversation that he has here. I picked up on this, and I was just like, it just really stood out as like a big detail, sort of. When he's talking to Malfoy, he says, "My father's next door buying my books, and mother's up the street looking at wands," which makes it sound, and it's possible that Narcissa is just looking at wands for herself or something. But if like the way he phrases that, you know, Lucius is next door buying my books, it sounds like his mom is looking at wands for him.
That's how I read it as
right?
well. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, now that is a freaking giant detail right there, because if Draco doesn't go to if Narcissa just buys Draco a wand and he didn't go there and have the wand choose him, well, like that's a huge detail, because Draco's wand is part of the final battle, and its allegiance to Harry at the end is like a huge deal. So it's like, if Draco's wand didn't choose Draco, then Harry stealing Draco's wand from him shouldn't constitute ownership of the wand that Draco is the master of going to Harry.
Oh my, I can't, honestly, this is like one of those situations where it's like it is one of my least favorite parts of the entire saga, is the explanation that Harry becomes master of the Elder Wand because he stole Draco's wand from him in a physical like fight.
Right.
Like some other time without ever holding it.
That's back up a sec here. Right. So Harry eventually in Deathly Hallows steals Draco's wand from him physically.
Yes.
At that point, Draco has already become master of the Elder Wand because he disarmed Dumbledore with that wand.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So Harry takes Draco's wand. all of a sudden he becomes master of that wand for having physically took it from him, which then also makes him the master of any other wand Draco was the master of.
Which includes the Elder Wand.
Which includes the Elder Wand. But if Draco didn't go to Ollivander's when he was 11 and have the wand that Harry stole from him choose him, then none of that math should work.
None of it should work. And the only thing I would say is that maybe Narcissa is just there like perusing or chatting, because we do know that the very next thing that happens is that Harry goes and buys books, and then they even go to Aelop's Owl Emporium before going to get the wand. So it is entirely possible that in the interim, Draco just goes and gets his wand.
Goes and gets the wand. Yeah.
Which, anyway,
it's totally possible. It's totally possible. I'm just it stood out to me because it's like there's no reason to just go look at wands without the person who's buying the wand.
You're exactly right. Like, this is like one of those things that they're so personalized that it's like it's not there's no advantage to be there and perusing the shelves because like you have no idea what you're looking for.
Right.
You have no idea.
You're not
what the
looking
right
for
one is.
anything. You're just like it's looking for you.
Yep. Anyway, we move forward just a little bit. We go into Flourish and Blots for the first time when they get all their books. I did find it particularly interesting that one of the books that Harry particularly wanted was Curses and Counter Curses. That's something that I feel like eventually his affinity for Defense Against the Dark Arts, it feels like a natural fit.
Right. Yeah.
You know, for what he'll end up doing. So it's just kind of fun that that's like what he would have picked out.
Yeah.
Which Hagrid tells him he's not quite qualified to have yet.
I also love when he's talking to Draco. He like looks up and Hagrid's eventually standing there and he went and get ice creams. But like the reason Harry's in there by himself is because Hagrid tells him like, oh, I need to pick me up at the Leaky Cauldron. And it's like not like 2 minutes have passed. So clearly Hagrid goes into, or he sends Harry into the robe shop and Hagrid's like, I'm getting ice cream instead.
He said to pick me up. It could be anything he sees. Like he maybe just changed his mind.
I guess so. I just think that's funny because he returns so quickly. He's just like, guess what I got?
Incidentally, the question about what type of ice cream that Harry has, chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts, is a trivia question I think I've missed like 11 times.
I literally wrote trivia gold right next to it.
I wrote trivia right next to it as well. That's so funny. Anyway, we make it to the Aelop's Owl Emporium where we actually don't get a name for Hedwig yet. Nope. This was something that I thought came almost immediately in the wake of the purchase of the Snowy Owl, but we do not get that. We do sort of have like a small allusion to one of the other like favorite theories that we've had here on the channel, which is that like because Hagrid lives such a simple life and because he is able to interact with so many like amazing raw materials like unicorn hairs and even potentially horns, which just like one paragraph earlier we would learn are worth 21 galleons each,
which seems like a steal if you ask me.
It really does.
I mean, because like a unicorn, according to Slughorn in book 6, a single unicorn tail hair could be worth 10 galleons.
Yes.
And it's like, on a single unicorn, there's got to be like hundreds of hairs, but there's only ever one horn.
Just the one horn.
And it's only barely worth twice as much as a single hair. Like either unicorn horns are just plumb unmagical, which seems silly to me because the horn has got to be the most magical part of a unicorn, right? That's the only thing making it not a horse.
This is a good
right. Like the horn has got to be worth so much more.
That's the phrase of the whole episode right there. It's the only thing not making it a horse. It's a good point.
So anyway, I'd be. What I'm saying is, if it's me, I'm investing in these 21 galleon silver unicorn horns.
There you go. Good to know. Well, and either way, my point I was going to make is that we've always sort of assumed that there's like some chance that Hagrid is just very quietly wealthy. Which, when he goes to buy Harry an owl, which we know is kind of like a big ticket item, for someone in the wizarding world. Like it's not like he went and bought him like an ice cream cone. He already did that.
Which already did do.
He bought him like one of the most significant purchases that you could make, and even his own logic, he's like, I don't like cats, they make me sneeze. Toads went out of fashion years ago.
Neville.
Poor Neville.
That is a slight, they're like, you don't realize it at the moment, but that is throwing Neville under the bus a few chapters from now.
It really is. But then it's like when it comes down to these three, it kind of seems like anybody would pick an owl. Like they provide like the most function. I mean, cats would certainly offer like a certain amount of comfort, which is not nothing, but like, you know, it just, I don't know. It seems like Hedwig also offers comfort and is also useful.
There's also, exactly. It's just like, if you're coming in, if you're like a wizard or a witch, like there's nothing particularly magical about cats. I mean, I guess Crookshanks is like half Kneasel.
Yeah.
So there is that. I guess you could argue that, but it just seems like it's such a muggle pet, you know? All the muggles have cats.
I know.
You know?
Yeah.
Not as magical. And then like, it's not that toad, I mean, I don't know anyone who owns a toad. I'm sure certainly some people out there do, but we never learn anything magical about toads. Like they don't do anything that we ever learn of, which I wish Trevor the Toad had ever done something fun,
remarkable,
you know, besides try to run away.
Yeah, in our saga about what if Neville was the chosen one, we did have it be the case that Harry has a toad.
Yeah, named Hedwig.
Yeah, and is a golden toad and really awesome. Anyway, so moving on, we find our way into Ollivander's shop, which was founded in 382 BC. Just another fun trivia fact for you. So this company has been around for a very long time. So kind of remarkable in that regard. One of the things that I've always thought was really cool as like a characteristic to give to Ollivander is his absolute memory of every single wand and like characteristic. Like it's just such a cool like detail for Ollivander to have, because it's like, I think it does speak to his just sheer affinity and love for the creation of magical wands.
Yeah.
Which I find to be really cool. We learned about both of his parents' wands.
There's like Easter eggs there too.
Yeah, there are. Yeah. So you want to do Lily's and I'll do James?
Yeah, okay. So he describes Harry's mom's wand as 10 and a quarter inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. So it sounds like, you know, that's a what the Easter egg is that when he says charm work, it's a reference to the sacrificial love that protected Harry from dying.
Yes. Yep.
Yep.
And then additionally, we learned just a little bit about the father's wand, or James Potter's wand, which is a mahogany wand, 11 inches pliable, a little bit more power and excellent for transfiguration. This is just a kind of like early and fun nod to the fact that James ultimately ends up doing one of the most complicated transfiguration things you can in spellcasting, which is becoming an animagus.
Yep.
So just kind of neat that that detail is there from, you know, the very, very beginning. Gotta love that. You get the exchange with Ollivander where it kind of seems like he's like possibly scolding Hagrid a little bit. But once again, it feels like this is like one of those exchanges that suggests that like Hagrid's wand, if it was broken in half, is absolutely no longer broken in half. And Hagrid is very intentionally skirting the truth in his entire exchange, because it seems like Ollivander's like, but you're not using it, of course, right? Right. And Hagrid's like, oh, no, of course. No, I would never do that. And it's like,
still got the pieces. There's so many things are weird about this whole exchange. One, he says, still got the pieces, though. And it's like, why would, if you broke someone's wand in half, would you just give them the pieces back? Like, what?
I mean, it's useless. So,
it's useless. I guess there's that. It just seems weird to return them to them. But even at that, he says his wand is snapped in half for having been expelled from school, and yet all of the Death Eaters in Azkaban, Sirius Black even, their wands are just intact. You know, like why are their wands snapped in half?
It does seem like one of the big challenges, and they even eventually kidnap Ollivander, and it almost even feels. I think that there's a couple of wands that he makes while he's captive.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like the plot related reason why you would kidnap Ollivander sooner is quite literally because like all of these Death Eaters would need wands. It does feel like this should be like a if you get sent to Azkaban, your wand should absolutely just be
like they all need wands. That's the problem.
Yeah, if you're expelled from school and they do it, like absolutely.
Yeah, they can't go like buy you new wands or whatever.
Right.
So
the other really cool thing, or well, actually, before we get to the next cool thing, I would say is as he pulls his first couple of wands, Ollivander does, that is, for Harry, and one of them kind of stood out to me. It is Maple and Phoenix Feather, 7 inches, quite whippy. This is a ridiculously short wand. Like, we know that Umbridge's wand is 8 inches, and it's like when it comes to wand lengths, they don't necessarily always speak to character unless they're extremely long or extremely short. In the cases of Hagrid, who needed something longer because he's a half giant, and then Umbridge, who it's supposed to suggest that her 8-inch wand represents her like lacking of character.
Yeah.
So a 7-inch wand, like it's like a really
real short.
It's a really short. It's like a twig. So I thought I just found that to be kind of interesting.
I know. I wanted to. I should have looked up what the wand would, or like what the meaning of the wand wood was for that on like Pottermore, because you can look that sort of stuff up. That might have been interesting to know. 7 inches. It could be like him being like, oh, 7's the most powerfully magical number. Maybe Harry Potter needs a 7-inch wand or something.
Well, the thing that I do think is interesting about the wand that Harry ends up with is that it's Hollywood.
Yeah,
and
Hollywood, and he's famous.
And he's famous.
And he's famous.
It's like this is like another one of those details. Nobody's ever confirmed to me, at least, that is an intended detail, but it feels like it's so funny. On the nose. But it's also like a remarkably American thing. So it's possible to me that it is just actual coincidence.
It could be. We also learned about Voldemort's wand, that it's yew, which I think yew is like traditionally the tree of death. Right?
Yeah, that is correct.
So, sneaky.
And I think also like holly is a very commonly associated wood with Christmas, and Harry does eventually come back from the dead. So a little bit of like
Christ imagery there.
Just a tiny bit. Yeah.
There's not zero of that in this story.
Right. Not that I can't personally speak a whole lot to it. It's just I do think that there's some like the selections of the woods for all the various characters does end up having like obviously a rather considerable amount of meaning, and it is always very interesting to dig into what the characters have and how it's reflected in the wand description. So gotta love that. We learn, of course, one of the most vital details, which is that Harry's wand, it's extremely curious in the eyes of Ollivander, because it has the same phoenix feather, or the phoenix feather that resides in Harry's wand has a brother, which is the only other feather given by the phoenix. And it was, in fact, obviously Voldemort's wand. I feel like I said that in the most like disjointed way imaginable.
We learned that the feather in Harry's wand is related to the feather in Voldemort's wand.
Yes, and it's the only other one.
And it's the only other one.
This is another one of those things where it's like I desperately want more of this story, because what we'll obviously again go on to learn is that it's not just any phoenix, it's Fawkes the Phoenix.
I know,
that like resides with Dumbledore, and we know in the Fantastic Beasts saga that there is a phoenix that Credence is caring for, and is supposedly supposed to be the mark of Credence's like actual heritage
as a Dumbledore,
as Aurelius Dumbledore. Yeah, and there's this like known characteristic of Dumbledore's that a phoenix will come to a Dumbledore in need. Which is, we dug into this, I have to imagine, deeper than any other person like alive has, because we got through the end of Crimes of Grindelwald, which unfortunately was just kind of a tragedy of a movie. It was just very like disconnected. A lot of stuff doesn't hold up very well, and it's very complicated, but we worked so hard to find ways for it to make sense. But inside of that whole story is the predictions of Tycho Dodonis, which, I normally can remember it. Let's see here.
Despair of the daughter, return great avenger with wings from the water. There's an opening line there too.
There is, but you've got the gist of it at the very least. The big return great avenger with wings from the water. There's a lot of big questions inside of the Fantastic Beasts saga about what that could be in reference to. Ultimately, we know that there's like the baby swap that happens at sea, and that there's a child who is ultimately lost at sea as a result. And it seems as if there is the return great avenger with wings from the water, that what's happening is the baby who's lost in that situation is the one that returns to Credence later, and is the very phoenix that he is looking after.
Right.
And so
that the assumption is, and we just don't know, is that phoenix is Fawkes.
Right. But that would also mean that Fawkes in some ways has this very unique heritage back to Corvus Lestrange, and the Lestrange family is not exactly noted for their like innate goodness.
Right.
So this is just like one of the, I feel like I'm deep in the weeds now, but like
no, I know you are. But then there's another layer of this where it's like that comes up with the Fantastic Beasts series that I just realized the other day. Like another theory we had about that was that when we learn about the brother wands, we see in Goblet of Fire that like what it means is that when they're forced to fight each other, they will form this like golden strand, and there will be a bead that appears between them, and to like force them back and forth, and whoever wins, whatever. Like that's what happens in the graveyard when Harry and Voldemort are fighting. And we had a theory that Dumbledore's original wand was a brother wand to the Elder Wand.
Yes.
And that it shared a core, like a thestral hair from the same thestral that gave it a hair to the Elder Wand. And then, like, I'll tell you what, Ben, in Secrets of Dumbledore, I did not realize it, but when Grindelwald and Dumbledore are dueling, that's exactly what happens. There is like a connection with the bead that goes back and forth, and Grindelwald is winning, and then Dumbledore shoves it back the other way.
Oh.
And I was like, I could not believe I did not realize that. I was like, oh my gosh, it looks like they're connected. And I was like, oh, I wonder, could it be possible they have a twin core? I was like, oh, we made that theory. Oh my God.
It's like we didn't even pat ourselves on the back.
I know. I was like, how did I notice that?
No,
Wow.
it's amazing. Yeah.
So maybe there's more. Maybe we need to go back and visit that. Not that I feel like it matters, because I don't think they're making a fourth Fantastic Beasts movie, but whatever.
That's all right. That's all right. Anyway, so as we close out this chapter, though, we get one of yet another hamburger reference.
I underlined it.
Yeah, which
the most Muggle word.
The most Muggle word imaginable. And this is always just like one of those things, like where they go in and they're just sitting on like plastic seats and eating hamburgers. It's just like it feels like imagining Hagrid in that situation is like they've just left like the most magical place, shy of Hogwarts.
Yeah.
And now they're sitting on plastic seats eating hamburgers. It's like nothing could go from like super wizarding hard turn back into the Muggle world.
Yeah.
Other than that particular situation, which I think is kind of kind of interesting.
There's also a line down towards the bottom of this page where he says, I can't even remember what I'm famous for. And I think that's just a funny line because, like, he says he can't remember it, but then later on in book 3, when the Dementors show up, he sure can then.
Well, it comes back to him. Yeah,
it does come back to him.
Like a resurfacing memory. So
it's like they unlock it. So but not in a good way or anything. But
right. Yep. Yeah. So don't. I guess eventually you will remember it, Harry.
Yeah.
Is the point there? And then lastly, we kind of end with sort of like a rather mysterious little detail, which is just simply that like Hagrid is basically wishing him well, you're going to go back to the Dursleys, and then sort of like Harry turns to look back at Hagrid, and like as he does turn, Hagrid is just gone.
I wrote, there's no way Hagrid can apparate.
I wrote apparition ?
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah.
First of all, you don't learn to do it until your 6th year, I believe, right? Yeah, because you have to be 17 or whatever to do it.
Yep.
So Hagrid would not have been old enough to do it. 2, there's a lot more of Hagrid to do the apparating, and it feels like the amount of density you are matters in apparition based on like eventually how they're describing it to you. And 3, apparently he's not supposed to do magic after he gets Harry. So it's like he's not supposed he wasn't old enough to learn how to, and at no point should he have been able to learn to do it or like allowed to learn how to do it. And even if he was allowed to learn how to do it, it feels like it'd be really difficult, in particular for Hagrid to do it.
It does seem like he'd be facing like
I'm not sure how he got it. I'm not sure how he vanished.
Yeah. Maybe just his moleskin coat when reversed is an invisibility cloak.
Maybe he's borrowing the cloak.
He could be borrowing the cloak.
Yeah.
We know that Dumbledore has it at this point in time. Although for it to be that close to Harry and not return to Harry would seem kind of like
come on,
good.
dude.
But the other thing is that we know that another way to make an invisibility cloak is with demiguise hairs, and which is something that we meet again, in Fantastic Beasts. But like, it's possible. What?
I was like, could it be like a disillusionment charm or something? I guess maybe.
I suppose it could be.
It could be.
I was just gonna say. I mean, we know Hagrid is really good with Fantastic Beasts, so
Yeah,
it's entirely possible that maybe he has a demiguise coat and was able to just like invisibilize himself.
I guess it'd be a lot of demiguise. They're not very big.
Yeah, that's true.
I like the idea that he had the cloak. That makes a little more sense to me, because the cloak is like, you don't think about it, but there are times where like it'll be like Hagrid or like Harry pulled the cloak out of his pocket, and it's like, can you if you can try and imagine like any garment you would wear around your entire body also being able to fit inside of a pocket, is like there is like a magical nature to the fact that the cloak is able to make itself really small.
Yes, I think that's true.
I think it could make itself big enough to cover Hagrid.
That's a good point. It's a good point. Like it almost seems like we never get like a whole lot of descriptions, but the invisibility cloak is regarded as like one of the 3 most powerful objects that exist in the magical world.
Yeah,
I have no. Well, the only thing I was going to say is that I don't have a lot of trouble assuming that the cloak could extend, but we also know that at some point in time, as the Golden Trio get much larger, that like their feet often
like
are
I know
exposed
there is
underneath.
that too.
Yeah, but there's also the fact that like Mad Eye can see through the invisibility cloak, which is like one of those things
It
like
seems
where
like why?
Yeah, it's
Nuh-uh,
like
don't
it's-
like that.
right, like that's the thing that it forces me to believe is that somehow Mad Eye's eye is like of equal caliber.
Right, like there's more to it than we realize.
Right. Like you
Yeah.
could almost have like a whole saga. Like I know that like Grindelwald has like one like blue eye. and
Yeah.
I've sometimes wondered like, did Dumbledore and Hagrid and Mad Eye all sort of have a role in like the downfall of Grindelwald that like somehow, like what Mad Eye received is
I would love to have seen Mad Eye show up in Fantastic Beasts. That
Would've
would
been
have
sweet.
been awesome. Like in his prime. Oh, that would have been a great. I don't know how old Mad Eye's supposed to be when he's in the series, but that would have been awesome.
Well, maybe what they're going to do, because I think last time we were in that saga, we were still only in like 1931 and we're supposed to get to 1945. So one of my favorite like headcanon thoughts was like maybe they'll just wait 15 years so that like all the characters are actually aged up 15 years. And it's
Yeah.
like, whoa, they really like went for
They
it.
went for it.
Just
Playing the long game.
Commitment to the cause, apparently.
Exactly.
All right, Jay, before we close out here, we gotta discuss the chapter art. for
That we
chapter
do.
5. Yep. What do you think?
I think so. It basically what we have here is a chair with a bunch of wands on it, and then a floating wand shooting a bunch of like magical sparks and stuff into the air. So I don't feel like the scene itself actually happens because the wand is floating by itself that's shooting the sparks. It does. I guess it's supposed to make you like wonder, like, ooh, is Harry going to get a wand in this one? So that's kind of fun. I would say it's probably the weakest one we've seen so far.
Yeah, I feel somewhat similar. Like it's such an iconic one.
Yeah. For the amount of things that happen in this chapter, like why isn't Harry just holding a wand or Hedwig or a goblin or
Right. There is certainly a challenge, I think, associated like whenever constructing, especially if you're going to name chapters inside of a story.
Yeah.
I think that there's always a fine line you have to walk where you like chances are the title, and we have this like for thumbnails sometimes where it's like, a lot of times you don't want to give away the prize in the teaser, so it's like you don't want to give away all the information. You don't want to like show your hand. You want to like more like pose the question or something.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like, if you showed a picture of a little boy, Harry, holding up a magical wand in this particular image, then it would sort of be like, oh, this is the one where he's going to get a wand. So it's like, I mean, it still certainly like suggests that like a wand is coming in this chapter.
Yeah.
But I think it does walk the line just like a little bit more carefully. So I could see where there's a little bit of like complicated feelings about like what to include.
Yeah.
In this particular one. I also wouldn't be opposed to seeing an image in this art style of Hagrid and Griphook and Harry in like a little
in the
little
cart.
Yeah.
That'd been a good one because you'd be like, what? You'd have no idea what that is.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that'd be really great. So
we didn't talk about they introduced Griphook here in this chapter too.
we didn't touch on that at
Yeah.
all. Yeah, so Griphook obviously ends up being super relevant to the plot as we get to Deathly Hallows because he is literally the goblin that they like bargain with
Yeah.
to get inside of the Lestrange vault and
Yeah.
get Hufflepuff's cup. So
Yeah, Hagrid's like, don't ever deal with goblins here, and he's like, what about? It's like this is the first one I met. I immediately didn't listen.
right, yeah, like all of the advice that Hagrid gives before going to Gringotts is everything that Harry breaks in book 7.
Yes. Oh, also, just on this exact note, this is not related to Harry Potter, but I have to remind me to tell you later that I think Quoth can fly.
Okay. Anyway, all right. So as we close out for the day, do you have a review for us?
A review? Oh yeah, I was like, what of the chapter? Isn't that what we've been doing this whole time? Yes, I do. I have a review for us that we can read. Every week we'll be trying to read a review from one of you guys about the podcast. So this person didn't really leave their name; it just said AR1105. And it said, "Can't wait for more. Just finished the first 3 on YouTube. Can't wait for this to become my weekly routine. HP after all these years is still my go-to book when I can't sleep or have too much going through my head at night, and listening to the audiobooks has helped me a lot in the past few years. I read my first Harry Potter book 2, when I was 12, and now, 23 years later, I still reread the books. I wonder where all of us will be in life when this whole series ends and the last line of the book is read." That is true. I picked this one because of that line. I was like, ooh, yes, like where will my life be like 4 years from now when the podcast reaches the end of Deathly Hallows?
I know.
You know?
No, it's incredibly interesting
Like
because
I'll
it's
have like a 4th grader.
Ooh, that's
crazy.
wild. It's I know.
Man.
Yeah, it's like an arrow shot into the future.
I know.
No, I know, and it's really interesting too because the thing that stood out to me was just like the rereading of the saga, and like I think that throughout life, like that's sort of like what this story has done for me on so many different occasions. Is that like you go through these like tumultuous and difficult times, and so often it's like being able to go dive back into like a familiar world with characters that you love, and like these themes of positivity and like openness and welcoming. They're just like all, I don't know. It's just it's such like a reliable world to go and get lost in and find comfort in. So
right. And there's just always more to discover, which even like I feel like I'm even discovering still now as we're doing this exact read through.
No, I know. Yeah, I mean it's like when you're like we've certainly studied the books quite a bit, but I've never studied individual chapters of the story in the way that we are right now. So I'm having a really great time. I feel like it's completely sparking like brand new thoughts from like a theory crafting standpoint. Like I think there's just going to be like a lot of really cool stuff that comes from it. So again, we just want to thank everybody for joining us, in the journey as we kick off here. And again, if you're happy to, leave us a review, we would definitely very much appreciate it. And it might even be featured here in a future episode.
Maybe we'll crack the top 50 by the time we record the next episode. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. Oh my gosh, fingers crossed. We'll see.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time through the Griffin Door. Welcome, dear listeners. I'm Jonathan Carlin.
And I'm Benjamin Carlin.
And we invite you to join us through the Griffin Door, your one-way ticket to the enchanting world of Harry Potter. So grab your wands and dust off your broomsticks and join us as we unlock the secrets behind Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 6, The Journey from Platform 9 3/4.
Oh boy.
How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited. I think this is a really fun chapter. I think there's like some interesting like little bits of connective tissue that I think hold up pretty well. I think that there are some like little clearly this was the first books and certain things had not been established.
Yes, there was a bunch of times where I was like, this sentence didn't age well.
Yeah,
or this doesn't make sense. Like, I understand what you're trying to say about this character, but also it doesn't make sense. I will say I was checking the charts, as I do before we started. I will say that I found this one pretty interesting, not to brag or anything, but we are presently #1 on the books chart in Sweden.
What?
Yeah.
Shout out to Sweden.
What up, Sweden? Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.
We're in like the top 10 of the books chart of like almost every country, but Sweden, top spot.
How about that? I wonder how or why. For the longest time, I feel like on the Super Carlin Brothers channel, we were making a reasonable amount of Frozen related content, and I was always like, that's like Scandinavian, Norway. I was like, is this possibly how or why this particular area of the world is tuned in? But maybe they're just big Potter fanatics.
Maybe that's what it is. That's always one of those like, do people from that region love Frozen, or are they like, ugh, Frozen?
I don't know. Well, it's always a good question because whenever you're depicted in some capacity, we've frequently said this about like the Percy Jackson books, how oftentimes like a lot of the very like American references end up feeling like they fall flat more than they feel like whimsical.
Yeah.
But like I could totally see it being the case if you're from a different country and none of these things mean anything like in such a immediate regard. It's like, well, that's pretty cool. And actually, fun fact about this chapter in particular, because I did find I found a small change based on which language that you read the chapter in.
Oh yeah.
And Trevor the Toad in anybody from a Spanish speaking country or who has read the Spanish speaking version or Spanish written version rather. Let me know. But apparently Trevor the Toad is Trevor the Tortuga.
The Tortuga?
Which is actually a turtle.
So that makes so much sense though, doesn't it? Like I think, God, this is just connecting some dots in my brain. I want to say like, isn't it in like Aladdin and the King of Thieves are looking for like the Isle of Tortuga or something?
Oh, you could be correct.
I think that's what it's called. And of course it's just an island on the back of a floating turtle.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. So maybe, but literally, I was going off the Trevor and Tortuga.
Or is Tortuga the village in Pirates of the Caribbean?
It could be both.
Could be both. Okay. Anyway, we're not even talking about Harry Potter at the moment.
I know. Yeah, we've gone off. We've gone off the proverbial rails.
Well, if you listened to popcorn culture, that would have been the whole episode. We'd have continued down that line of thought for 1 hour.
But instead, we will start with the journey from platform 9 3/4.
Yes.
The chapter does begin once again where there's. Harry is back at the Dursleys for a full month. And honestly, all I can say is pretty much fortunately, we spend no more than about a page and a half back at the Dursleys before we successfully make it.
Thankfully. I mean,
yes.
and in that, I mean, they managed to be pretty awful inside of that like one page wherein Harry asks them, can you give me a ride to King's Cross, which they begrudgingly agree to because they just happen to already be going to London. But it is so clear right away that part of the reason they agree to it is because Harry tells them the platform number, which is 9 3/4. And they're like, ha, there's no such platform, boy. And then they get there and they're like, ha, ha, told you, bye. And they're like their plan right here is to abandon him. That's what they do. As far as they're concerned, they left him in a no-win situation forever.
It just speaks to how mean the Dursleys are too. Because like what Harry's literally doing is using his own resources, optionally choosing to spend all but 8 weeks in their home. And will just be gone. He won't. Yeah. He will not be in any way, shape, or form like an ongoing burden in the eyes of the Dursleys anymore. It's like I can't understand why they're not like celebrating.
Yeah,
it feels more like a more likely version of this would almost seem like they would go and be like, now we're going off to the islands of Majorca, to go and holiday for a little bit to celebrate, the departure of one Harry James Potter. But instead, it's just such a strange approach. But that being said, I think that there are a couple of really interesting things. We know how the Dursleys feel about the magical world, but there is like a couple of little things that sort of stood out to me a little bit about as Harry is sort of like almost changing perspectives and going from the existing in the Muggle world and crossing over into the Wizarding world, where now the Wizarding world I feel like almost has like its own bias facing backwards at the Muggle world. And one of those things is like when they drop him off at the train station, like they specifically refer to the signs for platform 9 and platform 10 as plastic signs, which like there's something about the like choice of word, like the choice of plastic, like instead of saying like the placard that read platform 9 versus the placard that read platform 10. Like the plasticness just feels so flimsy. It feels
so muggle.
So muggle. So like so very non-magical. Yeah. Whereas I feel like once you're in the Wizarding world, everything is like iron, or like the wooden or stone. Yeah. Like everything feels so much more like substantial and like meaningful, not plastic.
Yeah. Also, there's like a bit of a weird inconsistency just between this book and the other book and the other books moving forward, neither of which I think is accurate to the actual location of King's Cross, wherein it says in this book that they basically have a good term, said Uncle Vernon with an even nastier smile. He left without another word. Harry turned and saw the Dursleys drive away. Okay, so that suggests that from their car, they are parking between platforms 9 and 10 and just like saying, here, look, there's nothing there. See ya. Like they're still in their car having the conversation, which is like, one, that is certainly not where you would arrive to, like, you can't park between platforms 9 and 10 in a car. Like you have to like walk into a building to get to where the platforms are at all. You couldn't be sitting next to the spots in a car.
Right.
Which is just funny because then in the next book, they're going to go out to the parking lot to get into the car to fly it to the school. And there's also no parking lot. So there's just funny that on 2 occasions, the way in which cars interact with this building are inaccurate.
It does feel surprising just because it's like King's Cross clearly like goes on to be a really, really significant location, as does platform 9 3/4, which we can get to in a minute as well, because I have something to say about that.
Yeah.
But like, eventually, I mean, if you fast forward literally to like the very end of the saga, like, when Harry goes and faces death in the forest, where he ends up going to is King's Cross Station. It's sort of like this place where Harry sort of like leaves the the Muggle world behind and really enters the magical world like in a much more proper way. Like he's of course gone to Diagon Alley already, but like the significance of this location in particular is rather prominent, and like the selection of this location had to have been like pretty specific, for a certain amount of reasons. I mean, I guess there's the cross metaphor, symbolism.
Like there is
for the
a
fact
very
that
biblical allegory happening wherein Harry dies and ends up in King's Cross before he comes back to life.
Yeah,
it's like that's okay. It's so very on the nose.
Yeah. It truly is though.
Yeah.
But either way, yeah. So Harry wakes up early, and I do love for him. There's a couple of these like little moments, but just like his excitement, waking up early. I mean, it does remind me a lot of like waking up early for like Christmas or something like that. Like where it's just like you like normally waking up early in the morning as like a young kid is never ever 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 the preferred scenario. So I love the excitement for him that he's just like anxiously awaiting his ability to to head off to school. He does successfully make it to King's Cross Station, where the Dursleys, as we said, leave him, assuming that he is probably just going to be like stranded at this point in time. Although to be fair, Harry did just strand them boatless on in the hut on the rock. In the very last chapter. So
I guess they got back within a day, though.
They seem to make it. Everything seems to be okay.
Yep. I do like that when they leave him, it says according to the large clock over the arrivals board, he had 10 minutes left to get on the train, and I like to think that that's more of like a rounding thing, and that it was closer to like 9 3/4 minutes left.
Hey, I love it. That was so good. Speaking of 9 3/4, though, Harry doesn't know what to do because he doesn't know where 9 3/4 is. Enter the Weasley family.
The Weasleys!
Where there is no Arthur for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. He's not there.
He's not there to drop the kids off, which maybe just working that day.
I was having so much fun with this chapter. So, packed with muggles, of course. That is the very first line from any Weasley we hear in the story.
Oh, that's a fun fact.
Yeah,
so who is the first Weasley we ever hear speak is Molly.
Is Molly. And then I think it's also fun. I think you hear Ginny talk next before you talk to any of the other ones.
Yes.
It's, Mom, can't I go? Which is so funny. And then what I think is so funny is that Ginny's the first one to talk. And it's like, I just highlighted that line too. And it's like, oh, they're going to get married. That's Harry seeing his wife for the first time. That's so fun.
I know. Yeah, no, it's really wild. There's, of course, Molly asking the family, now, what's the platform number? And this is one of those things where it's like even in the, I think in the film, Hagrid says like, now what's your platform number? Stick to your number. That's very important. And it's like one of those things where like, it must have just not been decided yet, like whether or not these quirky, like would they rotate? Like next year could it be like 7 1/8,
right?
Or like would it always be ever so slightly different? But I feel like this was like one of those things where maybe it wasn't known how iconic platform 9 3/4 would be, and then it was like, well, now that we've established it, it can't be.
That's
anything
almost
else.
exactly what it had to be because now what's the platform number? I literally highlighted that and then wrote the word "nope" next to it.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just like, nope. I'm sorry. In your world, this is an incredibly iconic location to everyone, and the number is very obvious. You do not need to check. There's no way Molly Weasley doesn't know that you board the Hogwarts Express at platform 9 3/4, especially since this isn't like her first year. Like she's not like, oh yeah, I graduated a long time ago and this is my first kid. It's like, no. In this chapter, we learned that you've got 7 kids.
Yeah,
so,
two fully graduated.
Yeah, you've been here every single year for at least the last 9-10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
But then can I say on the flip end of the spectrum is I feel like the introduction to Fred and George is so perfect. Like their characters, I feel like we're just locked in from the very beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
So we get like the exchange and it's like it's always been one of my favorites. But Molly basically says, Fred, you next. And let's see here. Fred says, I'm not Fred, I'm George, said the boy. Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother. Can't you tell I'm George? Sorry, George, dear. Only joking. I am Fred.
It's like, it's the first thing you know about them.
Right. It's just like, everything else that follows just fits that exchange perfectly.
Yeah.
And so that's like a fun piece of like continuity that will just like continue on forever. And then actually there's even an additional piece of continuity that I don't know that I've ever picked up on before, which is that shortly thereafter, as like the train is leaving, I'm just jumping ahead a little bit right now, but Fred and George tell Ginny that they will mail her a toilet seat.
Yes.
And like a Hogwarts toilet seat or whatever as like a joke. And this is always one of those like trivia facts that I feel like gets lost in my brain sometimes, because I'm like, I swear I thought Fred and George tried to send Harry a toilet seat at the end of this book when he's in the hospital wing after his eventual battle with Quirrell and Voldemort. And I went to one of the last pages, and sure enough, they did attempt to send him a toilet seat. Oh. So they are like, their relationship with this whole toilet seat thing, which is prompted to them by their mother,
by their mom,
yeah, who I think specifically says like, now behave yourself this year, like don't go blowing up any toilets. We've never blown up any toilets. What? Great idea though.
Yeah.
So like they really I was gonna say, so they just I feel like Fred and George from the very beginning are exactly Fred and George, and I love that there's like this hilarious like throwback to the toilet seat joke.
Oh yeah, right away.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's super fun. I also noticed something as I was reading through this chapter that I had never noticed the first time, and maybe it's just because last week we made 2 videos basically pointing out like how brave Harry is the whole time.
Yep.
But like there are I think like 4 occasions in this chapter alone where Harry like is described as brave or whatever, or has to do something. Like I kept underlining, I was like, he's brave again, he's brave again, he's brave again. I'm like, wow, they're really hammering, which makes sense because this is the chapter right before he's going to get sorted into Gryffindor.
Yes.
And that's like the thing. So maybe it's like, oh yeah, really establish Harry's bravery here, like on the train ride. But like as Molly is describing how to get onto the platform, and she says, don't stop and don't be scared, you'll crash into it. That's very important. I literally highlighted, don't be scared, and was like, as if. So that's the first thing he has to do right there, and then I think it keeps coming up as well. I'll bring it up as we keep going on because I kept highlighting it, but I thought that was fun. Then he gets on the platform. And this was I thought was a weird thing. It said cats of every color wound here and there between their legs. And I was like, I guess we're just trying to paint a scene for like, oh, isn't it so magical? Look at all these animals just everywhere. But like, why are the cats just roaming around?
It's like they would almost certainly, just like the owls, probably be in some type of like transportation container.
Right. Yeah. Why?
Like, right. Yeah. So it does seem kind of unlikely. Not to mention, it seems like when Hermione eventually has Crookshanks, it's not like it needs to say like Crookshanks was playing with another cat in the corner of the Gryffindor common room. It's like it doesn't seem like cats ever come up other than Crookshanks ever.
I know it seemed like
and Mrs. Norris, of course, yeah,
with this many cats around, like you never hear about other students having cats, even though some other Gryffindors must just have animals.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Speaking of which, we also get Neville's first line ever, which is, Gran, I've lost my toad again.
Yes, I know. And this was the thing. Like, I literally, I was kind of like mind blown how much you get beaten over the head. Like, it's almost like to the point where I'm like, is this like verging on like a little bit like redundant or possibly even like unnecessary? Because I think Neville, like the like disruptions or the number of like interjections that come from Neville losing his toad, I think is like 4
It is
times.
like 4. It's like, yeah, that's the very first thing he ever says. And then even then it says, I've lost my toad again. So it's like clear this has happened before, but now he's boarding the train. He must find Trevor on the train and then lose him again because then he's traveling the corridors.
Yeah, and he's asking, and then eventually Hermione interjects saying that Neville has lost a toad. And then by the time they board the boats to go to Hogwarts, Hagrid asks, like, Neville, did you find your toad? And it's
he just says, is that your toad?
Oh, yeah, okay,
and it's that to be, the way he says it, it's almost like, did Neville not even realize Trevor was in the boat?
I know, yeah. It's like, I can't imagine how Trevor ends up being a character in any capacity at all. Like, it would have been fine even if they just had Trevor jump off the boat and go, like, live in the Black Lake from the very beginning. And it was just sort of like, yeah, this kid is not intended to have the boat, not the boat, the toad. So, like, but I ended up doing, like, a little bit of reading on this because this has always been one of those things where I'm kind of like, clearly what you're trying to establish with Neville is that like he's kind of got this like forgetfulness or like maybe like he's not always paying attention, so like the remember all that's coming will eventually make sense. But like one of the things that I saw sprout up is that apparently like when the book first came out or maybe like a few books in, when we eventually learn about Neville's uncle Algy, who is the one who I believe originally gifted Neville the toad, like that there was some possibility that Trevor is actually Uncle Algie as an animagus, and he's like constantly trying to like escape.
Why?
Like, well, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's like it doesn't really hold up very well at all, because it's like if you're an animagus, it's like you could just get away extremely easily. Or maybe
Well, you'd think, except boy, does Peter have a time escaping Crookshanks in a couple years.
That's true. That's true.
Maybe, okay, new theory. Maybe, because you never learn anything specifically magical about Trevor at all. Like, he keeps being lost, and that's sort of his one-trick gag the whole time.
Yeah.
Just that he's trying to get away from Neville. What if his power is that something about him produces like some sort of like memory loss toxin?
Oh, that would be extremely interesting.
It's
Yeah,
like,
I like that.
It's not that it's not that Neville's like losing him or that he's trying to escape. It's just that he keeps forgetting about him at all because of him.
Well, and there's a couple of big things that we can talk about here, not the least of which is the fact that both Ron and Neville have one arm tied behind their back going to school, and that they're both using hand-me-down wands.
Yes.
We know that Neville is going to be using his father's old wand, and that Ron is using his brother Charlie's wand, which I had a cool theory on, because it was like, this is like one of those big questions where it's like, wands are not a passed downable thing. Like, your relationship with your wand only grows the longer that you have it.
Yeah.
But interestingly, Charlie goes on to work with dragons, and we know that this wand has unicorn hair sticking out. And I was like, what if Charlie found his affinity for dragons, went to work with dragons, made his own wand using dragon heartstring?
That honestly sounds pretty good, because I don't know why you would pass a wand down at all.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, like it's just
Like,
not
why?
really like it's not like a known. There's not really a basis for it. Like your relationship with your wand, the fact that the wand chooses the wizard is so specific that like it's kind of like one of those things. And then if you go into the deeper reading about like Ron's wand in particular, the particular pairing of core and wood, if you read about it, it will actually specifically say like these are notoriously like faithful wands to their original masters, but will not work well in the hands of somebody else. So like all of Ron's struggle with like mastering early magic for his first couple of years can largely be chalked up to the fact that he literally has a wand that actively does not want to listen to him.
Yeah, we made like a whole video about this, but yeah, so the wand wood in combination with the unicorn hair is the worst possible combination to have been passed down.
Exactly. So, but I think what you could also point to go back to your original point about Trevor is that we never learn any like magical abilities. We know that a lot of creatures that students can bring to school for some reason have magical something.
Yeah.
Crookshanks, even being half Kneasel, is an incredibly clever cat and is able to like reveal a lot of plot related things in Prisoner of Azkaban. So I like your thinking, because it also suggests, because I think after maybe year 3 as well, we don't see Trevor anymore. I can't remember when he stops.
Finally goes away.
Yeah, he just sort of like disappears. But we know that like Neville is being hampered in a lot of ways, like magically, by some of the like generational like pressure that his grandmother is placing upon him, the shadow that he's living in the wake of his parents, who were both brilliant wizards, the trauma associated with what happens to them. But we also know that Neville himself ends up being quite the talented wizard. So it's like, it would make more sense if like what's literally happening is like Trevor has a particular ability that is not useful for its master, and he's also using a wand that is actively like lessening his ability to excel. And so it's like Neville's a great wizard. He just has bad like aura around him.
Right. Yeah. He's been like poorly equipped to go to school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But interestingly, someone who is equipped with something kind of fascinating to me is Lee Jordan.
I know.
Who ends up being like another one of those characters who I absolutely love. Obviously Lee will do the commentary for the
Quidditch matches.
For Quidditch, and he's got like it was like sad to me like reading through when Lee Jordan had graduated out and it like wasn't him anymore.
Yeah.
We eventually get Luna, which is like well worth the wait.
Which is well worth it. And Lee does go on to do Potter Watch, which is also great.
That's cool. So you like a good throwback. So he just had that commentator.
Yeah.
I'm
a host.
Exactly. Yeah. He had it in him. But the thing that he's bringing with him to school, he has a box with something inside that poked out a long hairy leg, which we eventually learned to be like a giant tarantula.
They describe it as a giant tarantula, but I like wrote next to it like acromantula, because like we are exposed to Aragog, the giant spider in the forest,
who was believed to be the monster associated with the Chamber of Secrets.
right? And he's of course just basically a giant tarantula.
Yes.
As far as I can tell. And they are later classified as acromantulas. So like when they later say that like Lee's got a giant tarantula, I'm like, is this a different breed of large spiders, or is it just like the words you're using to describe what it looks like?
Regardless, it doesn't fall into the category of cat, owl, or toad, which you're supposed to be authorized on. But apparently, I mean, Ron's bringing the Scabbers the rat, which doesn't end up being flagged in any way, shape, or form. So maybe it's more of a guideline than a rule.
More the guidelines than actual rules. Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. So we meet Peter. Let's see. Speaking of, I love when the twins meet Harry for the first time. Which George is the first to talk to him.
George is the first.
That's always trivia, or at least first Weasley child to talk to him, because obviously Molly already did. But I love when they say they ask him like, Harry Potter, of course, the twins, and Harry goes, "Oh, him. I mean, yes, I am." I just love the "oh him," like,
that guy.
That guy. Yeah, it's me. I'm him.
Clearly, Harry has not grown into his reputation in any way, shape, or form.
Nope.
And honestly, I feel like if you were the Weasleys, you'd probably be like a little bit skeptical if Harry himself responded, "Oh him." I mean, no, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I know. Like, oh no, yes.
It's like, are you sure it's you?
Yeah. Shortly after that, we get Ron's first words in the story. Which are "Mom, groff,"
because he's got something on his nose. Like, this is another one of those where I wish I could come up with some clever explanation, but like they even carried it over to the movies. But I don't know if it's supposed to be like how Molly is maybe just like treating Ron as like if he's supposed to come across as like a little bit of like the underdog or the runt of the family or something, like being like the youngest of the brothers. And then like because Ginny is like the daughter, like
she gets special treatment, but like he couldn't have been bothered to like wash Ron's face.
I don't even know what. Yeah, but like it's so funny because it's like literally what you first see is that Molly is trying to wipe off Ron's nose, which is just embarrassing for Ron. But then like I think Harry notices that like there's still something on his nose, and then Hermione like at the end is like, "You have dirt on your nose. Did you know?" And it's like I'm like, what is the deal? Like, is there supposed to, like, is this a reference or like some kind of, like, I don't know. So I'm not exactly sure what that is, but they certainly like really hammer it down. We also meet Percy, and here's another like one of those little changes that I think is kind of funny because the audiobook has a difference in description of the prefix badge, which by the way, I have to mention this, for the first 5-6 years that we read, 5 years at least that we read these books, we always read it as the perfix.
Well, because this is one where our dad would read the books to us.
Yes,
and he was reading it and saying the word perfect out loud instead of prefect.
Yes,
and like this is one that he eventually just like in his brain, he like a prefix I think are like a real thing in like British boarding schools.
Yeah, I think that's like a real position.
Yeah, it's not just like a Hogwarts thing. So if you're American and you didn't have prefix at your school, like this is a real thing across the pond, as it were. But like I don't think our dad knew that either, and he was just seeing it, and like to him, he was just like, I think it just all blended together, and he said perfect, and it was like, and it made sense. It's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, Percy the perfect. And I was like, oh, they have perfects at the school, the kids who are like who follow the rules perfectly. Like it made sense to me.
It never caused any fuss whatsoever. But so yeah, I'm sure that we're not alone on that. At least maybe on the American side of things. But
yeah. I'll also point out on this exact same note that since this is the chapter where we meet Hermione, we also called Hermione Hermione for I don't know
until the
the movies. Yeah.
We had no idea how to pronounce
it. Yeah. But that was a huge one.
That was like one of those things again where I think I've watched an episode or a season of Great British Bake Off where there is somebody who is named Hermione as one of the contestants, and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, like that's so cool to see like another person, bear this name. Anyway, long story long, the shiny red and gold badge as written in the book that I'm holding is read in the audiobook as a shiny silver badge, and apparently this change was made because in Order of the Phoenix, when Ron eventually gets his badge, it is described as being like a P with like the Gryffindor like emblem on it, so it's meant to sort of like retroactively match what they would look like in the future. Yep, the house specifically.
Okay.
So anyway, silver badge is how Jim Dale will read it. Red and gold badge is how it is written in the book. What I find interesting about this is that occasionally when we're doing trivia on the Super Carlin Brothers channel, like J-Verse Ben's type stuff, there will be like, oh my gosh, I swear I remembered it as this instead of that. And occasionally we'll be like, let's go to the book. Let's see what it says. And like a lot of times you'll fact check it and you're like, well, it is right there. So anyway, I feel like I had to make like a point out of that because it's like, okay, what color is the prefix badge? And it's like red and gold. And it's like, silver?
Silver. It's like, no, there's been a change.
I know, yeah. There's
been a little altercation.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, the prefix badge, we get a little bit more Fred and George action with them. It's like, hang on, I think I remember him saying something about it, said the other twin, once or twice, a minute, all summer.
I know. They're just like so in sync. And it's like your first interactions with them are all the same. It's just like they're just on all the time.
Yep. The other thing to kind of keep an eye out for, and this was something that a patron of ours once pointed out to me, but it was the fact that Fred seems to be the and I'm going to put this in extreme air quotes because I don't know like amongst twins if this is like a thing or not. You have twin boys.
I do have twin boys myself, Nick and Nate.
Yes, it seems as though Fred is very consistently like the twin who will start interactions. Like he's like very frequently like the lead man of like the twin duo, but they're always in sync like this. So not that it really matters, but it was like one of those things I never picked up on before, and then I've caught it.
Yeah, like once you notice. Although it is George who talks to Harry first and like summons Fred over to help him.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
So there's that.
Yep. So then we get the little line about the blowing up a toilet again from the twins.
Fantastic. Then I love when they're talking to. Well, this was interesting. I thought they're talking to Molly again and said they saw Harry Potter and he said saw a scar. It's really there, like lightning. And I'm like, it's interesting that word is out about the shape of Harry's scar because
that's true. Yeah.
Because
why would it be?
Well, that's what I wrote in next. I was like, either Dumbledore or McGonagall or Hagrid has to have spilled the tea because they're the only ones who should have seen it.
It's Hagrid.
That's it. Should have told you that. It's 1,000% Hagrid. He's like, oh yeah, I delivered Harry. Had a bolt of lightning on his head.
He's a heck of a storyteller.
Heck of a story.
With Tom down there at the Leaky Cauldron.
I know.
I actually, you jumped one line ahead, and I thought you were going to talk about the exact same thing I highlighted, but there's just a cool little throwback line where like Molly points out like you've already seen him, Ginny, and the poor boy isn't something you goggle at in the zoo. I think this is sort of like good awareness on the part of Molly to sort of be like you have already seen this person. Like just because now you know who he is, it shouldn't change things just like with your perspective.
I know. She's like, hold my butterbeer, Mom. I'm going to marry that kid, okay? Shut up.
I know. There's that. But it also feels like the boa constrictor.
It does,
sort of like Harry sort of relates the boa constrictor who's basically being goggled at the zoo.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like just immediately you can tell like Molly Weasley is just good people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a line a little bit later on where just in this exact exchange where Fred says, all right, keep your hair on to his mom, and it was like, I assume he's just joking, but is it possible Molly Weasley's wearing a wig?
Who knows?
The whole time? Not that it matters, but it was like, I'm sure it's just a joke.
Let's see here. I guess interestingly, like if you go back to the original introduction, it does say, Harry swung around. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys, all with flaming red hair. Each of them was pushing a trunk like Harry's in front of him. And so it's like, it just refers to the boys as having like the flaming red hair. So maybe to fit
Who
in?
knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe she's just wearing a wig matching the rest of the family.
There you go. Yep. So let's see. Then as we move forward, we do get the official reference to the giant tarantula.
Yep.
So that we do know that it is a spider that is specifically gigantified. Made up word I just created. Just
Gigantified,
now. Gigantified. Oh, that's much better. I said gigantified.
Gigantified,
Yeah. Mine was worse. I'll admit it.
All right, cool. Yes, I nailed one. I highlighted the line. The door of the compartment slid open, and the youngest redheaded boy came in.
Chills.
I know. I was like, it begins.
It begins like the best friendship. Like so many things don't happen if this doesn't happen. Like,
I know. This is such a big moment.
It is. And Ron is like, he's such a fantastic inclusion. You know, like I'm not inclusion. He's obviously one of the like most iconic and key characters of the entire story. But like it's so great because I feel like Harry and Ron both have like their individual like strengths in terms of like, especially with this very first encounter, like they're both nervous for their own reasons. And like Harry sort of has this like notoriety, but he like doesn't really understand it. And then like Ron's struggling with like feeling like he's sort of like the odd man out in the family where like the rest of the family's already done everything. And so like, you know, even though Ron does have a better idea of like what's going on in the wizarding world, like he has his own insecurities. And so like I love the way that their friendship is like coming from like it like some of the same things but for different reasons.
Yeah. Well, I also like I just made note of this because I think like Ron comes to the compartment and like slides it open, but like at this point because of the exchange they just had with Fred and George, like he knows who Harry is. Like he's not just like accidenting into the situation. Like he knows where Harry is. But I to me, it's like Ron hearing his mom say like, "You've already seen him. He's not some boy to be goggled at in the zoo." Like, oh, he must be so alone or whatever. Like it really sounds like Ron like hears that and like seeks Harry out.
Oh, like he's like looking to be like, hey, like, you know, you're probably alone right now. I can fix that.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's so sweet.
I know.
Ugh, he teared up.
It's a very emotional sentence.
It is a very emotional sentence. I mean, like their friendship is remarkable and amazing, and like it's at the heart of like what makes Harry. I mean, it's like some of the most vital to the themes of the overall story. So
yeah,
it's just amazing to get like that first entry point to what that friendship will obviously ultimately kind of blossom into. As we get like some of the exchanges with Ron and Harry, you get a little bit more. I mentioned before, like the thing about like the plastic. There's sort of the exchange where Harry's asking like, "Are all of your family wizards?" And Ron's like, "I think so. I think Mom's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never talk about him."
No. I don't think that's true.
No. Okay.
No. Okay. So I looked it up. And I was like, I'm curious who this second cousin might be.
Okay.
But
what'd you find?
So it's like no one knows how second cousins are related to you, but
I know.
So I'm just going to read it to you. Second cousins have the same great grandparents as you. So you can think of it this way: your mom's first cousin's child is your second cousin.
Okay.
So your mom, or your grandpa's brother's grandchild, right? So if this is Molly's second cousin, that means it's her grandfather or just her grandparents' brother's grandchild.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, yes.
Well, but here's the thing: all of the Weasleys are purebloods, right? So Molly's a pureblood, meaning that her great grandparent is a pureblood, meaning his brother was a pureblood. So his descendants, no matter what, are not Muggles but Squibs.
Squibs, yeah, almost certainly. Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah. So no, they're not. I guess that's not even the question, though, is it? It's are all your family wizards? So I guess that's more of it. So I guess he's not saying he's a Muggle, but
he exists within the Muggle world.
He exists within the Muggle world, but would not be like a full on. He would at least qualify as Squib rather than Muggle.
Yes, that is. Yeah, that would almost certainly have to be the case. And just to back up and further clarify, we of course know that Molly comes from the Pruitt line, which is also pure blood, as well as Arthur's line, which is Weasley, which is also pure blood. So either which way, just to get those family trees knocked out and correctly. But I feel like what I read from that is there's almost like a I don't even know if there's some possibility like this particular member of the Weasley family is sort of like, oh yeah, he's an accountant. We don't really talk about him.
We don't talk about him.
So, just sort of some of that like otherwise like reverse facing bias, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah. Somebody says you must know loads of magic already. Not even a little bit, which is kind of surprising. You'd think Ron would know some magic.
Yeah, you would think so. And as we like sort of jump forward as well, we get the introduction to Hermione, which is super fun here in a few different pages, or a few pages ahead rather. And this is like another one of those moments, and we can jump back around a little bit, but Hermione sort of like immediately says like, I've practiced a few basic spells already. And it's like when When?
Yeah,
did you?
when?
Like all I can think is that like once you're on the train, it seems like you might just be allowed to perform magic because there are older.
Oh, there's
students.
no way to do it there.
Yeah, and also the train itself is physically moving, so I feel like your like geographic location can be kind of specific. Like when casting a spell to like figure out where the spell happened.
To me, I've always thought that like, she must have done this like before she even got on the train, though.
I know, but like
just at home.
Yeah, I feel like she's right. Like that would violate.
I guess it would violate it.
Underage.
It seems like it might fall into the category of like
Accidental magic.
accidental magic or something, even though they can clearly tell like specific spells are being cast. But I wonder if maybe the rule doesn't apply until like you've actually gone to school.
You know, the other possibility is just that literally Hermione has wizard neighbors.
Oh, also possible.
You know?
Even likely.
Right, yeah. So it's like on Privet Drive, it feels pretty clear that with the exception of Mrs. Fig, everybody there is distinctly non-magical in all ways. And so it feels like maybe it's like it really stands out a year later. But I suppose it is always entirely possible that like, I mean, a lot of wizards have to live places. You know, it's like they don't all live in, you know, like Hogsmeade, I think is the only fully magical community.
Like in the world, I think.
Yeah, so it's
or
like,
at least in like Britain.
Right. So, I mean, that means that like, it wouldn't be entirely uncommon. So maybe that's how she's just getting away with it. And Harry is just really, really in unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah, that it's like, no, it's very clearly just you. There's no way around it, Harry. We know you did it, not some house elf named Dob here. Are you kidding?
Yeah, right.
Oh, man. Also, so next page, we meet Percy's old rat, which is, of course, Pettigrew, a.k.a. Scabbers. So right away, this is our first introduction to Peter Pettigrew, the rat, who's just sitting there. Oh, man, that guy sucks.
I know. This is like one of those things too, like where it would be so interesting to get like a little bit of a backstory as to just like how the Weasleys came to, because we know that Ron inherits Scabbers from Percy, but it's like, where and when did Percy get this rat from?
I know, they just show up like in Percy's room,
right,
and just be like, "Hey, what's up? I'm your rat now. I'll be here."
Like, I suppose I think at some point we get like an explanation where like Peter needed to be able to like hear wizard news, and so he was like looking for a wizard family to like, you know,
take him in, which like makes sense, but like I don't know. In general, like you would think that if suddenly you found a rat in the house, you'd try and get rid of it rather than be like, it's a pet. Especially Percy. Percy's like, I want to keep this rat as a pet. Like it doesn't feel like it adds up.
It doesn't totally. I mean, I suppose there's some question as to like whether or not like Bill and Charlie, like you never get like a really good feel for how Percy feels about Bill and Charlie and like whether or not like he like looked up to them. Because you almost always see Percy as like the oldest brother.
He seems like the oldest one because he's the oldest one at school with them.
Right. Yeah. But like possibly if Bill and Charlie both had pets, like maybe he would be like, that's very important to me that I have a pet at school. And,
I guess so.
You know, so and it seems like maybe Ron has just recently inherited Scabbers, basically with Percy being, you know, receiving that prefix status and receiving the owl.
Oh, that's the other thing. He just who gives away their pet?
to a sibling.
To a sibling who's gonna be, that'd be like, and they like a little bit, I mean, I guess he doesn't know he's gonna be in Gryffindor or anything for sure, although it seems like you probably can just tell since all of the Weasleys have been. It's like, here Ron, you have my rat, and then Ron will just be at school playing with your pet. You know, the whole situation seems weird, and it's not the last weird thing that happened with Scabbers on this train ride. But before that, Harry says the word Voldemort out loud, and Ron gasps. Then he says, "I'm not trying to be brave." So once again, Harry's bravery is described, and it's like, never much of an effort for Harry to be brave.
I know, but it is interesting too because I feel like this is such a defining factor of bravery because I highlighted that same exact passage, and it's like bravery. Is not the absence of fear. Bravery is the willingness to act in the face of fear.
Right.
Because it's what I always say is basically like if you're not afraid of doing something, then you're not being brave by doing it because bravery specifically is like a reflection of fear.
Right.
Like it's sort of like the counter to that concept.
Right.
You know, so it's like while somebody may fear, you know, like snakes, for example, like if you handle snakes all the time and you're not afraid of snakes, then you going and handling a snake is not like, oh, wow, you're so brave.
So
it's
brave.
Like, it's just sort of like I just do this. Like, you know, this is just like, you know, I'm not worried that anything's going to happen. I know my relationship with them well enough. I know the ins and outs well enough. So, but I feel like that's a little bit of what's happening here. Is like Harry is like he just doesn't know enough about what's happening in the world to necessarily be terrified of the name. Although knowing that this particular person was the one who, you know, like killed his parents, it would seem like just on reputation alone at this point in time, with the knowledge he does have, it feels like there's a good possibility that an 11-year-old would be pretty scared of this person.
It does say later in the chapter that he was starting to get a prickle of fear anytime someone said the name. But that was just part of entering the wizarding world, he supposed.
Yes. Yep. As we scoot forward a little bit, we get the
Trolley Witch?
The Trolley Witch, yes, indeed. And Harry is so excited because he finally has some gold and he's going to buy as many Mars bars as he could carry.
Boy, it falls right in there with hamburger. It's just a really muggle-sounding thing.
It does, but like Mars bars, I think are kind of interesting as well because I feel like it must be, I think it's a Muggle British thing.
I think so.
Like if you went to like the checkout counter at a grocery store, like we have plenty of candy from the Mars Candy Company. Like I think M&Ms are made by Mars.
Yeah.
But we don't have Mars bars just like on the shelf here.
I think I've looked this up before that Mars bars are just rebranded as Milky Ways in America.
Okay, that seems entirely reasonable. Yeah. But I do remember that when we were kids, our mom and dad went to Ireland to run a marathon in Dublin, and when they returned, they brought us back each a Mars bar.
I remember it being the best candy bar.
It was pretty cool. I feel like it was the best because it was like, oh my gosh, it's so foreign, but like, you know, like at the same time, not. And actually, on this exact same token, this is just an anecdote about my own life, is that my wife Alice is absolutely obsessed with white chocolate crunch bars, which can only be purchased like internationally, and they are not available here in the United States. And so like when we first started dating, one of the things I got her for Christmas was like a whole case shipped over.
Wow.
but it was
that's
like
hilarious.
It was such like an alarming, it was like $100 for like 12 white chocolate crunch bars to be shipped internationally.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what it is.
Okay.
In the United, so there has been like almost intentionally and laughable confusion about this, but the Mars bar was sold as the Milky Way bar in North America. But then back in the UK, they also sold something called a Milky Way, but it's just a different chocolate bar altogether.
Wow.
Which is extra confusing. Meanwhile, you can also buy in the United States a Mars bar, which is a candy bar with nougat and toasted almonds coated with milk chocolate. So there is a Mars bar and a Milky Way bar in America, which is different from the Mars bar and the Milky Way bar in the UK.
Wow.
But the Mars bar, so it starts with the Mars bar in the UK, then there's the Milky Way bar that is the American name for it.
Okay.
Then they made a Milky Way bar in the UK, which is different, which is confusing. And then back in America, they also made a Mars bar, which is different from the Mars bar and the Milky Way in the UK. So there's just so much confusion. Anyway, Milky Ways are good. There we go.
Yes, indeed. And Harry was not about to buy Mars bars.
No.
In the meantime, though, Ron, of course, has his corned beef sandwiches, which I'm
Four of them.
Four of them.
I noticed that. I was like, why so many?
Quite a plenty.
Quite a plenty.
But I will tell you that, like, as I read that, I was like, I know that I'm supposed to be, like, you know, excited for, like, wizard candy and stuff like that, but I was like, I can go for a corned beef sandwich.
I know.
Right,
and he's like
he's not, like, a huge fan of it, which, again, this is, like, one of those things where it's like Mrs. Weasley is so kind and thoughtful and considerate and like a great mom and all these things, but it does feel like Ron just very consistently gets like the short end of the stick in a way that like you know, even when you hear about like the Yule Ball in year 4, like it doesn't seem like Fred and George wear like
secondhand dress robes.
Like they're not embarrassed to wear like whatever it is that they've got. But like Ron is you know, laden with like the lacy.
Even Ginny must have okay ones.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Like maybe she didn't need hers until later or something, but like still, like Ron is the one who definitely gets the short end of the stick. He gets the color sweater he doesn't like. He later gets socks that don't go well with his clothing. It's like he gets these sandwiches. But it's like he's also a little defensive about it. He says she hasn't got much time, which is like I feel like that sentence doesn't really like line up with magic in general, because like you can just make the sandwiches with magic and you can duplicate the sandwiches with magic. So it's like the time is not much of an excuse for your crummy sandwiches. I don't think.
Yeah, I know it's a really strange one too, because that's the other thing too, is that like this is really the only time that anything that Mrs. Weasley makes is ever regarded as less than.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's like why aren't they good sand? It's like they're dry, and it's like that doesn't sound like a all of Mrs. Weasley's food is amazing all of the time, except for these sandwiches.
Right, it's a specific plot point in Deathly Hallows that like Ron is struggling with camping specifically because he's used to square meals either from the Hogwarts house elves or from his mom's like, spectacular cooking. So, it's like one of those. I mean, it's like the platform 9 3/4 thing. I mean, we've spent way too much time talking about it for how important it is to the plot, but it is always just like one of those things where it's like, oh, all right then. Let's see. So then the next moment, though, I really do like a lot. This is Harry's ability, because he has never had anything to share before or indeed anyone to share it with.
Yes.
This is like both a sad and happy moment because it's like it's so neat to see that like the moment that Harry has anything to share, his first instinct is to do so.
Yeah.
Like it's like you could see a situation where it's like I'm sorry, but like my whole life I've never been able to buy candy and I can and I just really want to be able to enjoy it all.
I just want to try it all.
Like, I mean, it wouldn't match Harry's character in any way, but like for an 11-year-old to have that take or that perspective on it, like not unheard of.
Not unheard of. Yeah.
So I love this. I love that, like, you know, the first thing that Harry really does is like an act of generosity and a way to bond with Ron.
Yes, I love that as well. And in doing that, they start opening the chocolate frog cards. Ron says he's missing Agrippa, which this is one of those things whenever you're listening to it, it sounds like he's missing a Agrippa card, but it's not. He's missing an Agrippa card, and I looked it up because I was like, we don't get much more content, so I can just tell you for a fun fact who Agrippa is in the wizarding world. He lived from 1486 to 1535. He wrote books about magic and wizards. Some important people thought his books were evil, so they put him in jail for writing them. That's what it says on his chocolate frog card.
Wow.
Fun fact.
Okay.
Yes.
So interesting little piece of information. Yeah. 100%. I always thought that this was like a strange occasion where Agrippa was a fantastic beast of some kind, and it was sort of like it was almost as if like this was less of a specific person and more of like just a generic,
species.
Like a species, yeah. It's like I need
I'm missing a demiguise card.
Exactly. Yes, precisely.
Yeah. The other one he's missing is the Ptolemy card.
Yep.
And this is sort of like a funny thing because similar to Nicholas Flamel, who will come up in a second, Ptolemy was just a real person in real, like, you know, history. So it's just sort of funny that like the wizarding, like as you're reading it, you realize like, oh, these famous people from what you think of as famous people from Muggle history, maybe they're actually famous because they were wizards.
Yes.
Or whatever. But hilariously, what Ptolemy is famous for is he's a 2nd century Greek mathematician, astronomer, and geographer who is famous for his controversial and wrong opinion of a geocentric theory of the universe, which is the idea that the Earth is the center of the universe. So that is what Ptolemy is famous for. So it's funny that he's just famously wrong about it.
That is very famous. That is very interesting. And I'm glad you looked into it because I was like, these certainly are people. Then we get Albus Dumbledore. One of the things I was just really curious about is underneath it says currently headmaster of Hogwarts.
Yep.
I am so fascinated to know whether or not the chocolate frog card might update like itself.
I know. I literally highlighted the word currently because I was like, I wonder if he stopped being it, would it change it? Because if that's the case, or like if he does other accolades, like how do they go about choosing which accolades go on there? Or is it just sort of like the card's ability to be like, nah, this is what this person is known for. I'll adjust my information accordingly.
It would be especially funny as time went on because I feel like when Dumbledore is under the scrutiny of the like he like loses his Order of Merlin and you know he's like taken away from like all the other councils and everything. But like I think Bill or Fred or George or someone jokingly says like the only thing he cares about is that they keep him on the chocolate frog cards, and it would be so funny if like at that point in time, all the other accolades were like removed, and it just said like Albus Dumbledore on a chocolate frog card.
That'd be so funny. I also love his description on the chocolate frog card. It just says particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945. Next, like what a simplification of that whole event, since there was apparently going to be 5 full movies about it. I thought it was funny. Then, of course, this is when they name drop Nicholas Flamel for the first time, which is like, oh, if you're paying attention, there it is. And then it ends with chamber music and 10-pin bowling, which is just super funny. That's one of the things. I like to think Dumbledore insisted, wrote his own chocolate frog card or something.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I don't even know what chamber music is.
I think I've always thought it's just church music or something.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. Now that you say it, I'm like,
Yeah, for some reason I always associate it, and I have no explanation for this, with the toilet, with just a chamber pot,
elevator music, but in a bathroom.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that.
Oh man, hold on. Let's see. Hold on. I'm gonna look up chamber music. Chamber music is a form of classical music that is composed for a small group of instruments, traditionally a group that could fit in a palace or chamber or a large room.
Okay.
All right. There you go. Chamber music.
So chamber music. How about that? The other fun fact about or chocolate frog cards, and not even really a fact, but more of a theory, is that the reason that it was so important for Dumbledore to be on the chocolate frog cards is that it was an early iteration of what Hermione will eventually do for Dumbledore's army with the Protean charm galleons as a means for communicating. And this is one of those really interesting things where in Crimes of Grindelwald, we know that there's a big book that the members of whatever this pre-Order of the Phoenix happen to be are able to open to portraits of one another and communicate transglobally. It's a very powerful piece of magic. And so the idea is almost it'd be very curious if Dumbledore quite literally had the ability to communicate through the chocolate frog cards with anybody who potentially had one.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a bunch of references to it, because even the very next line, it says Harry looked back and saw to his astonishment that Dumbledore's face had disappeared. And Ron's like, well, you can't expect him to hang around all day. But I'm like, that doesn't make sense. That's not how portraits work. Dumbledore is not physically there. He can move around, but typically there really is no reason the portrait should just leave altogether.
Right.
Right, so there's that. And then even earlier we just said Dumbledore's the only thing he cares about is that they don't take him off the chocolate frog cards. And it's yes, because that is literally his method of communication.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yep. And it would also feel I think that eventually in King's Cross Station, when Dumbledore is talking to Harry, he's Voldemort doesn't understand things like this, house elves and children's tales. And I feel this is even one of those things where Voldemort could have easily foiled lots of Dumbledore's plans by just paying attention to these collectible trading cards.
Right.
Even the fact that Dumbledore uses candy as his passwords for you know, the Griffin Door,
right,
as it were, you know, which is sort of the inspiration for the podcast name. It's it just suggests that you know, this is one of the, Dumbledore's aware of the fact he's everybody underestimates candy. But candy is a very powerful thing because it brings joy to people, and that joy is you know, it's reflected in what it means otherwise. So anyway, I've always loved that thought. I think it's just so fascinating and interesting, that especially because eventually what Hermione does for Dumbledore's army is effectively a rudimentary version of this exact same concept. So little one-way walkie-talkies. So pretty cool. The Bertie Bott's every flavored beans, I think is pretty fun. You get you get the ordinary flavors like chocolate and peppermint and marmalade. And I was like, I like this assortment.
Okay.
Sure. Those, when I think of generic, flavored beans, you know, like Jelly Bellies or something.
Yeah.
Marmalade, peppermint, both on that list.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, well, the thing is so funny that the way you phrase that, because if you think of Jelly Bellies, jelly is just sort of marmalade is just a different kind of jelly.
That's an extremely good point that I hadn't considered at all. So I'm sort of frustrated with this very next passage though, because Ron does bite into one of the beans, and we did just have a Jay versus Ben trivia question that was specifically what was the flavor of the first bean that Ron bites into. And I think I put turnips.
And it sprouts.
It sprouts. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was in the zip code.
You were right there. You were right there. But guess what? This is also where Harry is brave enough to nibble off the edge of a green or a gray one.
Hey, there you go. Yep,
See?
yep. You're right.
Harry's bravery comes up again.
I know. That's amazing. Okay, so big emphasis on that. Let's see. Then once again, we have the return of
Or the escape of.
the escape of Trevor the Toad, which we've already sort of covered a little bit. Ron pulls out his wand. You got like a little bit of unicorn hair poking out. The failed spell. All of these types of things are happening. Hermione's introduction proper, I think, is pretty cool because she sort of like knows about Harry despite the fact that she too has been isolated from the Wizarding World. So
yeah,
I think it goes to speak to Harry's fame even more. Like this is like, you know, every like Wizarding household would of course know Harry's name, but this is somebody who didn't come from there, who still has been able to find books and information about, Harry himself, which I found to be pretty cool. And each of those texts, you could easily make a question, which is just which of these is not one of the books that Hermione references that she had seen Harry in, which is Modern Magical History, The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts, and Great Wizarding Events in the 20th Century.
I think what's interesting about that is that you can almost assume from the context from the rest of the book is that Nicholas Flamel plays no part in any of these things, like so specifically like no part in any great wizarding events of the 20th century or in the rise and fall of the dark arts, which you would assume is like a book about Voldemort, I guess. But like given, it seems like it would also be about Grindelwald if it's, a fairly recent book.
Yeah.
And since like, Nicholas Flamel like is in the Fantastic Beasts movies. Like clearly he's not like ever fighting Grindelwald directly, but he must not be involved enough to warrant a mention because later on she can't remember him at all.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So if he was a part of it, he would have been mentioned in these books. So we can just sort of abstract that bit of information from there as well.
That is true. We also get a line here from Hermione who says that I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I hear Dumbledore himself was in it, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. I'm like, there's no way in the world. I mean, maybe there is because obviously Hermione ends up being a fantastic Gryffindor, but like it seems she's even a hat stall.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like she would clearly recognize like that this would be a potentially good house for her.
Oh yeah. Well, what I thought about what I highlighted that she says, "I hope I'm in Gryffindor." It sounds by far the best. So my thought was like, did she choose Gryffindor too? Like, was the hat like, Ravenclaw seems like a pretty good fit, and she's like, but I want to be in Gryffindor or whatever. And it's like, it's our choices that define us or whatever.
I could see that. I mean, because she is, I believe, what is it, like 5 minutes that it would take for the hat to decide?
Yeah, if it takes more than 5 minutes to decide, it's a hat stall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would suggest that at that point in time, the hat basically is like putting it in your hands.
Yeah.
More so, basically saying like, well, like you could be in either of these, and I think you would excel in both of them.
Right.
What do you think? Because then I think it would reflect even more.
Yeah, I like that idea that she chooses Gryffindor the same as Harry.
Yes, yep, of course. Let's see here. We learn a little bit about the other professions in the wizarding world as Ron starts talking about his two oldest brothers, Charlie and Bill. Charlie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts. This has always felt like one of these things where like the ecosystem of professions in the wizarding world seems rather like finite in nature. Like there's, it seems like you could become like a professor, a shop owner, like
work for the government,
yeah, or like kind of what else, and so it's kind of fascinating that
Quidditch player,
yeah, potential profession, but yeah, so there's not that many different like pathways for all these people to go, and realistically when it comes down to it, I think what we've always kind of said is that like in Harry's year, if there's 5 boys, let's just assume that there are also 5 girls. 4 houses means 40 new students per year. And this is all rough numbers, but then 7 years of students at school at once means 280, students across this entire age range, at least in like Britain.
Yeah.
It's like the wizarding population, at least in this particular area, is not huge.
Yeah. It's like there's like up, as many as 40 new people joining the workforce per year,
Right.
which is pretty small. Now, I have heard arguments before that like perhaps Hogwarts population is particularly small while Harry is there because of the first Wizarding War. So lots of like potential parents would have died in the war, yielding a smaller crop of students for this generation.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like that definitely tracks, and it does feel like the type of thing where I suspect the school would almost be a bit of its own room of requirement, if you will, where it's like it will always be able to perfectly house however many students are there, like without issue.
I think that's probably true too.
It'll just sort of expand as needed.
I think there's an interesting line in here though. They're talking about Gryffindor and Slytherin and stuff like that, and Harry says, "That's the house vault. I mean, you know who was in?" And Ron's like, "Yeah," or Ron confirms, "Yeah," that he's aware of that. But what is interesting to me is that like it seems to be fairly well known that Voldemort was in Slytherin, but not very well known that Tom Riddle is Voldemort. You know, because like even the next year, Ron is polishing the trophy for special services to the school, which is Tom Riddle on it. And it's not like he's like, oh God, I know who this is, even though he knows Voldemort was in Slytherin. So it seems like people just sort of know he was there, but no one seems to be able to piece together like the connective tissue that Tom Riddle is Voldemort. Like, who do they think he was then?
Well, I know, and this is a good point. I mean, you and I have just recently spent a little bit of time sort of like delving into those first years after Tom Riddle graduates, which I always struggle to remember what year he's in Chamber of Secrets when Hagrid basically is accused of opening the chamber.
I think he's a fifth year.
He's a fifth year, okay. So anyway, so like that roughly speaking means that Tom Riddle would graduate in the mid-1940s, and we know that he goes on to work for Borgin and Burkes, which is when like all the Hepzibah Smith stuff and everything happens. This is like during a period of time where like he would have basically been exiting the school with similar accolades to Dumbledore himself. Like, he was like one of the most talented
brilliant students ever.
Yeah, like highly talented. Like everybody loves him. You know, like it seems like, you know, like Slughorn would have put him in touch with anybody, and yet he goes to work for Borgin and Burkes. For the longest time, you and I both have operated under the assumption that he was only at Borgin and Burkes for about like a year or so, like a pretty brief spell.
Yeah, but we mapped it out pretty hard a couple weeks ago, and it turns out it's like there's like it's like a minimum of 10 years that he's working there.
Yeah, but so I almost think a huge portion of this could be like Voldemort, like whose goal is to be immortal. 10 years is effectively nothing to him. Like that doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. Like you know, it seems like too much of a compliment to say like, oh, he was patient, you know, like he was willing to like wait, you know, for whatever. But like, I think that maybe on some level, like he desperately, I mean, even the fact that he changes his name from Tom Riddle to Voldemort, wants to disassociate from that name, from that identity, from any knowledge that he was that boy. So the fact that he may have spent such a huge amount of time, in part literally could have just been like, let people forget I was ever there, so that when I return, I will not be the shadow of Tom Riddle.
Like it's part of his plan to be forgotten as Tom Riddle.
Yeah, which makes sense because we've always sort of felt like there's this era of Voldemort's existence that just like, it's like, why was he not doing anything?
Yeah, why does it take if he graduates in the 1940s, why does he like how long is the war going on? The first Wizarding War.
Right, yeah.
You know, like what, you know, in what 1980 he still hasn't won yet.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And you know, and apparently is makes Grindelwald pale in comparison, and Grindelwald had a pretty massive following. So anyway, it's hard to know exactly how all of that, you know, sort of shakes out. But you are, I mean, I think you make a great point where it's like everybody seems to know Voldemort was in Slytherin, but like how?
Yeah, like then why can't, but yet no one's realized like what records did he set? What was he like as a student? It's
like people must have. Yeah, you're exactly right. That is a really good question. I feel like I don't even know if I fully processed it when you first brought it up. But it's like he must have done something. It wouldn't have even been that hard. Maybe there just had to be more students back at that period of time where it would have been like way harder to dissect out who it would have been. Because if you were like, roughly speaking, he must have been a student sometime in the past 20 years. Right. We can pretty much narrow that down to approximately like this many total people, hard stop. Like, it wouldn't even seem that hard to deduce out who his identity was. But I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it doesn't matter even to figure it out. It's just sort of like surprising that people know he went to Hogwarts and what house he was in, but not who he was.
Yes, yeah.
There is a funny exchange down here where they're talking about Gringotts having been broken into, and Ron says his dad says it must have been a powerful dark wizard to get around Gringotts, and I just made a note, like, or 3 teenagers.
Because we know 3 teenagers can get in there.
Because they do it.
To be fair, they do use an unforgivable curse to get in. So
And a Deathly Hallow and a Gringotts Goblin.
Yeah, so they have a lot.
And they're not just waltzing around, they're almost immediately caught.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it almost doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like really badly.
But it does. But I also like where Ron's like, of course, everyone's scared when something like this happens in case you know who's behind it. It's like, and he is.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Ron, right on top of it.
Nail on the head, old
Yep.
boy. Let's see here. And then we have the intro to Malfoy, who once again has come back. This is where we mentioned it, I think, in the last chapter. But at this point in time, the former Death Eaters, who had sort of gone into hiding after the fall of the Dark Lord or Voldemort, on when he attacked Harry as a baby, there were plenty of people, including the Malfoys, who believed that there was a decent possibility that Harry himself could be the second coming of the Dark Lord. So Malfoy's extension of a hand in friendship here is probably not him being friendly or even open to being friends with Harry for the right reasons, but probably much, much, much more because of the guidance from his family. Is the way I read.
Yeah,
yeah, like.
Yeah. What I think is interesting here is that, like, Malfoy comes down and he sort of opens the compartment and he says, "Is it true? They're saying down the train, Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it?" So it's like, that's him seeing Harry and being like, it must be you. You're Harry Potter. But then later on the next page, he said, I'd be careful if I were you, Potter. Unless you're a bit politer, you go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them either. You hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys and Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you. Which is interesting to me because he references Hagrid here, meaning that since he has come into the compartment, he has remembered that it was Harry who he was talking to in Madame Malkin's.
Oh,
because
yeah.
Otherwise he'd have no data point for Hagrid.
For Hagrid,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true. So he's like, he's talking to him. He's like, wait a second.
He's like, I have already stepped in it with this kid, but
And I have met you already.
oh man, I had the chance.
I
I
know.
blew it.
Interestingly, though, we do have a kind of unexpected situation that comes in its wake, though. So this obviously kind of
Yes,
starts a little
we
bit of a fight. Crab or Goyle ends up reaching towards the chocolate frogs to sort of just like bully them away from Ron. And of all characters, it is Scabbers, who's the hero of the scene, who basically chomps right into Goyle's hand and then gets like thrown against a window.
This instance makes no sense to me. I don't get it at all.
The only thing I can think here is that at this moment you have a young Peter Pettigrew who does not know that the Dark Lord could be back and is literally facing down one of his best friend's sons who have in his family, unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents.
Right.
From Peter's perspective, I mean, he's no hero. I'm not here to defend Peter Pettigrew at all. But this could have raised Peter's hackles a little bit.
Sure.
Essentially, Peter being I turned on the Potters out of fear, not out of lack of, not because I didn't like James Potter, not because I even followed the Dark Lord's regime. I mean, Peter is a coward.
Yeah.
Is what it really comes down to. So the fact that he acts in this situation at all is surprising, but I would say my explanation is just literally that Malfoy has just insulted James and Lily in front of who was one of their best friends.
But it's his fault they're dead.
It absolutely is. It barely makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm giving the best argument
I know. I'm like, I
don't.
don't get why he does this at all. Other than, yeah, you're right. Everything he does is cowardly. Except even then attacking someone seems like a little more brave than I'd give him credit for.
It's really his peak moment as a character.
This is basically it.
Yeah.
Even the sparing of Harry's life, that's even that, it's barely a sparing. It's it's a more moment of hesitance.
It is, yeah.
Which just turns on him immediately. But
anyway,
it's a weird scene.
But then he promptly goes back to sleep. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing too. Is I'm like, gosh, if I was in Animagus form all the time, I would be so bored.
I know.
I would be so bored. I would just, especially at the very least, on the flip side, maybe I wouldn't be bored. Maybe I would use my animal-like abilities to go and do fun things. But all he seems to do is sleep all the time.
Yeah.
Which just sounds miserable. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so as we scoot forward, though, we do finally make it to Hogwarts. We're in our robes.
Yeah, we do.
We have found our way to basically Hagrid, who's calling for all of the first years. Of course, Hagrid spots Harry immediately, which is always just kind of great. Like, I feel like there's so much comfort. I actually felt this way, like going to my own college orientation. Like, you go to orientation and you really don't know anybody, but then you meet like the 10 people at orientation. So like when you go back a month later and it's like, hey, you from orientation. It's like,
I remember you.
I know a person and you are that person and we are now friends. Want to go get lunch, please?
Yeah.
Because I need someone to make me feel like I'm at home.
Yeah.
So I can relate to sort of like Harry getting there. He's in like a brand new space. He's never like, they're in it's dark, you know, it's like they're in the depths of Scotland and the mountains and the lake and everything. And there's a friendly face. So I love that for him. I do love the, we talked a little bit about like, is there a reason why the first years take the boats while everybody else takes the Thestral drawn carriages up to the castle? And I felt like you had a good point here, which is essentially like to provide the rest of the students the opportunity to get into the Great Hall so that they can already be there.
Yeah.
And then the first years can sort of like get their first glimpse of the castle from the boats, which is no doubt just gorgeous. And then also can sort of like enter the school with the rest of the students sort of like waiting for the sorting ceremony to then begin.
That's right. Yeah. I do. As we're getting to the school, we go under the tunnel. This is where Neville loses Trevor again, and they're getting out of the boats, and Hagrid calls out like, "Oh, you there? Is this your Toad?" That was such a bad Hagrid. Sorry. And Neville turns around and goes, "Trevor!" And he's like, it's as if Neville's found him here. It's not like, oh, yeah, right, I forgot him. It's like, I found him, which to me sounds like somehow Trevor got in the boat with him. Like, he keeps trying to escape, but then did follow Neville into the boat, which is also weird.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't get it. Also means, as the way he reacts, it sounds like Neville was just like, I guess I just lost him. Oh, well, time to get on the boats. That's it.
I know. It's so miserable to think that you would have like your brand new pet coming to school with you, and like it's just like. Could you even imagine like not even making it into the threshold of the castle and having just lost the new pet entirely?
Oh, I know. Not only that, I mean, what is it? One sentence later, Hagrid immediately is like, "You still got your Toad?" It's like not even one. And I love that Hagrid immediately is able to. He says, "Oh, you there? Is this your Toad?" Like, he picks up. Like, I'm imagining Hagrid sees the Toad, looks around. That kid brought the Toad. Him. I know who brought the Toad.
Yeah, especially because Hagrid's the one who told us that Toads went out of style years ago.
He's like,
I've sorted this.
That one.
I will say the amount that Neville loses his Toad in this chapter, I feel like if I hadn't ever put chapter 6 under such a specific spotlight as we're doing for this podcast, I don't know that it's ever really stood out to me, but I got to the end of this chapter and I was like, I'm really tired of Trevor being lost.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, you are really beat over the head with it. And I it's like, all I can think is that like what we're going for here is like, we got to make sure that remember all makes sense. And I'm like, I don't even think you really do. I think it would have been fine.
It's fine.
Yeah. Like, I don't know that
we get it.
It gives me anxiety to think the number of times that this Toad is lost. I'm like, how is he ever going to get like through the sorting ceremony? Like, where does the Toad go? Where does Trevor go for the sorting?
I know. He's still holding his, he just walks up there, hands it to McGonagall.
Yeah,
Hold this.
I could see McGonagall just being like, please
not
don't
Gryffindor.
Please don't be
Please
Gryffindor.
not Gryffindor.
Yeah.
Gryffindor, man. Actually, Neville's also a hat stall, so it would have been 5 minutes of McGonagall having to hold the Toad.
That's true. I think he's not quite. He's just shy of the hat stall.
Oh, is he?
I think I was reading that last week because Neville is well, we're about to get to it anyway, but Neville's insisting for Hufflepuff.
Yeah.
And the hat just does not listen.
He's just like, dude.
I see
Go
what's
have
inside
fun.
you.
I
Yep, there
see.
you go.
I know better than you, my man.
Yep. All right. Well, anyway, so that brings us to the end of our discussion of chapter 6, where now we, of course, need to discuss our chapter art.
Our chapter art.
We get a little image here of a just really big looking chocolate frog.
Yeah.
And a photo of a really happy looking, almost Santa Claus-esque Albus Dumbledore. I will say that I don't mind the artwork that much, but one of my most disappointing sensations with like the Wizarding World as it has been manufactured into like merch and such like that is that the chocolate frogs are just chronically disappointing.
Oh, they are terrible.
Yeah.
Like they are, I mean, one, they are massive.
Yes.
They are very big if you buy them. So maybe to scale, this is correct. Although they have hexagon shapes now, so this card is actually, well, maybe this is the more canon version of the card, that it's a rectangle like a regular trading card.
More of like a playing card, yeah.
Yeah, whereas in actual real life, if you go to Universal or buy a chocolate card, it'll be that like hexagon shape.
Yep.
But yeah, gosh, me and you did a video once where we tasted every single kind of candy available at Honeyduke's in Universal, and it was just like across the board, whatever chocolate they're using is just not very high quality.
It's not. Yeah. It's like a waxy kind of like, I don't know. It's just not super great. So
it's
like,
not great.
Not only is it like not very good chocolate, but like eating a brick of chocolate is just like it's like a non-consumable amount of candy, and even just like biting it, like it's not hollow. It's such a brick. So anyway, what I've always wanted, so Universal or whoever, if you're listening, is like I almost feel like if it was filled with like caramel and nuts or something, like I don't know if that would be like off-putting for it to be frog shaped and like filled with like something like gooey.
You need to be able to put the entire chocolate frog in your mouth at once, as described in the books.
As described. So maybe what you really need to do. Now, the thing I would say is that the packaging that it comes in is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, you can keep the packaging exactly as
That's
is.
almost the reason to buy it, though.
Yeah, but like, like chocolate turtles is kind of what I'm thinking of. Like,
yeah.
Like normally, and maybe that's even like the inspiration for a chocolate frog. I don't even know. But like the like a chocolate turtle is like nuts, caramel, chocolate. So just pack like 3 or 4 of those inside of the exact same box, make them like delicious and tasty instead of this very like otherwise unusable brick of.
I mean, it is, yeah, because all the chocolate there is like the same chocolate, but at least some of the other chocolate has like fun, whimsical wizard things like mixed in.
Yeah.
To like. So it's not all chocolate, but this is like, it is what's frustrating is that it's the most famous candy in the store.
Yeah.
And also the worst one there.
And it's just not good.
It's just not good. And it's like, it should be because it's expensive. It's the one you want. It's like when you go in, you're like, I want to try a butterbeer and I want to get a chocolate frog. And it's like, don't get the chocolate frog. It's not good. They don't. And yeah, I mean, if you want it for the sake of display, that's for one thing. If you want the card, that's great. But yeah, I wish the candy itself tasted better.
It would almost be better if it was like a bar of soap. a brown bar of soap.
Just a brown bar of soap.
Yeah.
It'd
be more useful at least.
Chocolate soap. So anyway, I do like the artwork on this one. It is fun. I like when they're eating the chocolate frogs. And obviously, it's cool that they put the chocolate frog, the Dumbledore card on there because it's it feels like a little just like MacGuffin when Harry gets it. And it's like, oh, Dumbledore. Haha. But it's like, no, that was important.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big clue.
How about a review? Do you have a review for us?
I do. I have a review for us of the podcast. This is from Hetty Ruth, who says, spectacular! Sensational podcast hosts Ben and Jay Carlin combine their history of conversational expertise, see popcorn culture, with their vast knowledge of Harry Potter and this incredible new show. These brothers have the charisma and magnetism of professional entertainers, the true sons of a news anchor, which never fails to leave listeners enthralled. Their camaraderie leads to wonderful banter and extremely captivating discussions surrounding one of their favorite book series. This show is absolutely worth the listen. My goodness. Thank you, Hetty Ruth.
Wow. What a remarkably
flattering review.
That is so...
I'm like, I don't even know if you're right about this.
I know. It's like, I could never live up to what you just said. But thank you so very much.
Thank you.
As ever, it's been really cool to see the Through the Griffin Door on some of like the Spotify charts. I think we got as high as 67.
67. On Spotify, when I looked today, we were at 114. So we're still on there.
We're still on there.
We're still on there. And of course, in Sweden, we're just crushing it.
In Sweden, yeah, absolutely.
What up, Sweden? We need shirts that say like, I'm big in Sweden.
I know. Yeah. No, it's been really cool. So any feedback you guys have for the show, if you'd be happy to leave a review, we would absolutely appreciate it. And maybe even read it here in one of the episodes. So definitely check that out. But otherwise, guys, I think that's all for this week.
Yeah, otherwise, we'll see you next time through the Griffin Door.